Kronbacher's here. That's even better. All right, good. Hey, welcome everyone to tonight's school committee meeting. We're going to let Mark get up to the table before we start the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, don't sit down, Mark. We're all going to stand up.
Okay.
All right, Daryl, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a consent agenda, the minutes from November 12, 2015, and oath to bills and payroll.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Motion's been made.
I wasn't here, I'm not going to.
Second.
Thank you. Is this the way it's going to go all night? Because I just want to know now. All right, motion is made and second. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I
Opposed?
abstain.
One abstention, because he wasn't at the meeting. Mr. Mazzoni abstained. Thank you, Mr. Mazzoni. All right, that passes. Interested citizens. Are there any interested citizens who'd like to come up? Seeing none. We'll jump right into recognition. What do we have, Superintendent Clenchey?
We're going to start off with Olivia's report this evening.
Going on this week, partially last week, and future forward. Tonight at the high school is the
Did he get to you early?
just a little bit. Hypnotist show as a fundraiser for the junior class. There is a Powder Puff football game on November 24th. The student recognition breakfast and principal's coffee will be on December 3rd. There's financial planning on the 8th, and the winter concert for the high schools on the 14th. Then the middle school has a Loaves and Fishes food drive, Red Ribbon Week, a magazine drive, and National Diabetes Month awareness going on right now. And they also have a Spirit Day tomorrow. And that's all I have.
Excellent. Thank you. We have a few other recognitions this evening. I'd like to start off by recognizing our fall sports program. We had a tremendous season, 212 participants in all of our programs. That's a 47% participation rate. Boys soccer, we had 31 students participating. They were league runner-up, qualified for the MIAA tournament. Girls soccer, 35 students participating. They also qualified for the MIAA tournament. Golf, 12 participants, and they qualified also for the MIAA tournament. Field hockey, we had 34 students playing, and they also qualified for the MIAA tournament. And boys cross country, 16 participants, qualification for the MIAA tournament. Nathan John qualified for the all-state meet that's being held this weekend, or will be held this weekend more correctly. Girls cross country, 9 students participating. League runner-up, qualified for MIAA tournament. Joe Feltus and Lana Johnston qualified for the all-state meet that will be held this weekend. Football, we had 53 people participating this year. Undefeated league champions, 4th straight year in a row. They obviously qualified for the MIAA tournament. 9-1 record heading into our Thanksgiving Day game where they'll play Air Shirley more correctly, and that game will be played on the Alumni Field. Cheer, we had 22 students participating, and they also qualified for the MSSAA tournament. So a great season. Thank you to all the athletes and coaches. And before you know it, we're going to be starting our winter season. In fact, Chairman Fontanella has probably already had some gym time planned.
We already started planning. I'd like to make one comment about that. You know, you ran down the list, and the scope of what we offer we've talked about, and the number of participants. But to offer that many sports and have every sport qualify for postseason play is a significant achievement. And that's an outcome, you know, but obviously there has to be a process behind that because it can't just happen on its own. it would happen on its own if we didn't have so many sports, because all the best athletes would congregate to a sport, and then you'd have a shot at being really good. So, but when you spread them all out across all those sports, to be able to say that all of them qualified like that means that, you know, the kids are working hard, the coaches are working hard, the families are supporting the athletes, and the community as well. So that's pretty impressive, and people should make note of that. You know, as much as we talk about the football team, because they've had tremendous success and actually won, you know, the state championship 2 years ago, the fact that all of the sports are participating into the postseason is pretty great.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for that.
Great year. Third recognition, our high school just finished the play Mad Women of Chaillot, and again, a tremendous performance, and I understand they're going to have a month rest, and then they'll be getting into preparation for their spring play. So congratulations to students and staff for a job well done. Community Wellness Fair. Every year, our Council of Aging puts on a wellness fair at the middle school, and a lot of time and work goes into that fair. We partner with them, and it's one of the many partnerships that we have. I just wanted to commend them on an excellent job. It's really nice as a community to get together and talk about wellness. They have food clinics there, etc. And certainly an important topic not only in our community, but across our nation. So, and I don't believe other communities do this, so it's kind of special that they've been doing it for a number of years. And that concludes my recognition.
Excellent. All right, we're going to move into presentations. The first one we have is titled on the agenda, Athletic Turf Presentation, and our Athletic Director, Mike Lynn, will discuss the alumni field renovation proposal. Before Mike jumps in, I'd just like to preface this a little bit. The agenda title, Athletic Turf Presentation, a little bit misleading. We're not really talking about turf per se. What we're talking about is a renovation of alumni field overall that goes beyond specifically the turf aspect of it, and Mike will talk about that in detail. But what I'd also like to point out is this is a repeat of a presentation that was given at the Board of Selectmen about a month ago that was designed to allow the Board of Selectmen to accept the in-kind services being offered by a community member who wanted to help out the town, who is an engineer. Sean Reardon is here and will probably get a chance to speak for a few minutes during the presentation. But this presentation was specifically for the Board of Selectmen to allow them to debate the offer of in-kind services, which they ultimately voted on to accept. So we're just kind of making this presentation in front of the school committee to continue the dialogue, communication to us and to the community at large. But this is the Board of Selectmen's vote that they took for those in-kind services, and then there'll be more to talk about as we get through the process and Sean delivers his product to us. But tonight we're just going to hear what Mike had to say for the Selectmen, what prefaced that vote by the Selectmen. So, Mike Lynn, thank you.
All right, thank you for inviting us tonight. Just so Kevin Hunt is right here, if he could, and Sean Reardon is also here tonight. As Mike said, this is the third time I've made this presentation. We've made it to the Board of Selectmen. We've also made it to FinCom, and we'll get right into it. Current challenges that we have, our fields are unable to support the amount of use that is currently demanded by high school and youth teams. All of our facilities are shared facilities for the most part, where we collaboratively share with the youth and the school teams. Fields are in a constant state of degradation. Limited amount of field space with very high demand for fields. And development of new active recreation areas is costly and may take away open space. There's been some discussion of some of the open space areas potentially becoming field space, but that really hasn't taken on life just yet. Here's an aerial shot of Alumni Field, just to kind of frame what we're looking at here, current conditions, and more close-up shots. The picture on the left is a picture of a trench that lines both sides of the field. The trench apparently is for drainage. Alumni Field's a very old field. We speculate it's between 40 to 50 years old. And the way the fields were built back then was with a very steep pitch on both sides. And that trench on either side, as you can see, there's a white line and a blue line. That blue line is where the soccer sideline is, and it'll also be where the girls' lacrosse sideline is. And that's actually even on a modified soccer field or a modified girls' lacrosse field. That is not a full-width field when we put that blue line. It's as wide as we can go, and it's still not wide enough, really, for those sports. The white line is where the football sideline is, so less pressing of an issue. But the blue sideline, as you can see, it's right on the edge of the decline that heads into the rock trench. It's very dangerous. For those of you who are familiar with soccer and girls lacrosse, those sports play right along the edge of the sideline just as part of the flow of the game. And so we oftentimes have plays where the boys will be playing soccer, the boys or girls will be playing soccer, they'll play a ball along the sideline, and just their flow of play will take them across that trench. And very much so when there's a throw-in, they're throwing in across the rock trench. For girls lacrosse and soccer, the trench is right there where they stand for their sidelines as well, so they're standing in a rock trench. Again, but the biggest issue is safety, and as a result, we play some night soccer games down there, but that's really the only time we play soccer. We do play every girls lacrosse and youth does down there. We have nowhere else to go with that sport, so we play there, and it's really a situation that makes me very, very uncomfortable. The slide on the right that's a real close-up shot of what much of the turf quality is at Alumni Field these days. That was before the frost, really, before we had some hard frost, so that weed was still actively growing. I don't know the name of that weed, but it's everywhere. And when it does die off, it turns into like a rust color. So if you're at Alumni Field for Thanksgiving, you can see shades of rust, and that's that weed. It's in its dormant state or its dead state. And that weed is very kind of rough and not very conducive for a playing surface. The slide on the left is a picture of, that's me on the other side, and I had my wife on the home side, the bleacher side, take a picture just to try and give you a feel for the pitch of the field. It's really almost like looking uphill when you're particularly on the home side. You're looking up an incline. It does impact play in the sport of soccer. The ball will literally roll down into the sideline, into the gully. And even a sport like football, where we have a lot of left to right movement as part of the flow of the game. The kids can feel themselves going down the hill or feel themselves running up a hill. So it's really not conducive for any sports. It's workable with football, but it's terrible for soccer, terrible for lacrosse, terrible for field hockey. And the slide on the right is, you can see the restrainment rope and where the bleachers are. That is the space where our cheerleaders are stationed and performing. We had 22 cheerleaders this past season, and that number's going to hold. We have tremendous participation in youth cheering in Littleton right now. That space isn't really level. It's hard pack, and there's not a lot of space between the rope and the bleachers for the girls to do what current day cheerleading has become, which is cheering along with stunting. It's not an adequate space, really. And also where they section themselves off, they're actually blocking the flow of egress across the front there, where the spectators really don't have access to that third set of risers without going around the back of the bleachers or coming up through the front of the first two risers to get across. So again, not really ideal. Shot on the left is just a shot of the current state of the staging of the bleachers. The planking that's on the bleachers is aluminum. It's in fine shape, but the underneath staging is in the state that you see there. I'm not a structural engineer, so I'm not going to make any conclusions on the structural integrity of it, but that is the state of it right now. I will tell you that those bleachers would not be up to code as far as the openings between the foot treads and the not having a kick plate. Small children, elderly people, it's very easy to slip and a leg could go through there. It'd also be very easy for a small child to go down onto the foot plate and possibly even fall through because bleachers really aren't built like that anymore with openings. They're fully enclosed. A picture on the right is just a picture of the siding on our press box, and that's just one snapshot. The press box is really in rough shape. It's it's not in great shape. That shows, that's just the T111 siding that's rotted out there. But, okay, slide on the left, that's our facilities at the field. Just as a result of how we've done our building projects, when we built the high school many years ago, the decision was made at that time to not build a stadium up there. So the stadium is essentially down at the old high school site, the middle school, Russell Street School site. And we really don't have access to the middle school or Russell Street School. And that's understandable. One's an intermediate building, one's a middle school. They're really not designed for high school spectators, and especially a Friday night football game, to be in and out of those buildings. So really what we have is 3 porta potties as far as facilities. You take a football game, we have 53 players, 22 cheerleaders, that's 75 kids for us alone. If the other team comes with similar numbers, we have 150 kids on site. Then we have parents, grandparents, small children, and we have 3 porta potties for all those people that are there with no running water. And it'd be nice, most schools, their field is adjacent to the school, so the building is open. People can go in there and use flush toilets. We don't have that option. The slide on the right is just outside of Alumni Field. That's a picture of the sidewalk and the granite curbing and the fencing. You can see it's all in rough shape around the outside of it. All right, now we're up at Lilton High School. Just to show our field conditions up there, that is where the field we're going to be looking at is a field that we play JV soccer on now. We used to just give one of the soccer fields to one gender and one to the other gender, but when we started playing lacrosse, one of the fields got beat up because we use it for lacrosse, so we then made that into a JV field, and the one on the left is a varsity field. Here's a picture. This is literally an everyday, this isn't, hey, we caught this at just the right time. This is every day, every game in lacrosse. That is what you will see on any ground ball situation in front of either goal. Because the kids are scooping the ball out of the dirt, essentially, they literally shake the stick sometimes to try and get the dirt out of the stick, and rocks and things of that nature get caught in the stick. So that's just a shot of a game at Lilton High School last spring. That's what it looks like in front of the goal last spring during our lacrosse season. This is a shot on June 2nd after heavy rains. There were heavy rains that night. I'll make no misgivings about that. The unfortunate part is we had to give away a home game that day. When you get into June, tournament time and graduation and all these events, things really need to stay on track and on time because you're running out of time. And we had an event the next night, and Oakmont had an event the next night. That game had to get played that day if possible. So we ended up going to Oakmont. This was our field that day, and this would be the field that we played on that day up at Oakmont. So a little different. It is a synthetic field. I know we're not talking about synthetic or grass today, but that is a synthetic field that we ended up playing on up in Oakmont that day. Just the last few slides, just talking a little bit about, and I know there was talk about how our fall went this year, but this is mostly about last year. Last year we hit an all-time high at the high school, 68% participation rate. 303 of our students were playing at least one sport during the school year. That's the statistic above state championships. That's the statistic that is most important. I'm speaking for John Harrington and myself. That is the statistic that gives us the greatest pride about Lilton High School. And I think you'd have similar stats with the arts and music. Just a lot of participation from kids right now. We have 25 total sport offerings at LHS. That includes our 4 cooperatives. We have 21 under our roof. We actually have 41 total teams, but I put 39 there for some reason. 21 varsity teams. 19 of our 21 varsity teams last year qualified for the MIA tournament. All of our fall teams this past fall were back in the MIA tournament. 6 of our varsity teams last year won their league championship, and 5 of our varsity teams completed undefeated seasons. I guess the point I'm trying to make is athletics are really healthy in Littleton right now. And at the youth level, same thing. Youth football and cheer, 250 athletes in 12-13. The numbers have held, they're similar numbers. Youth boys and girls soccer, they reported 500 fall, 500 spring in 12-13. I don't believe their numbers have changed much since those numbers. Youth boys and lacrosse, 250 athletes. And youth baseball, softball, more recent numbers from Chuck DeCoste, who's in the room, 216 athletes in 14-15. Just a couple closing thoughts. In the past 15 years, as everyone knows, we've built a high school, a middle school, we've renovated Russell Street School, and we've built this police department. The town of Littleton has done a great job with brick and mortar construction. Maybe this next bullet's a bit of an opinion on my part, but I feel like we've maybe missed some opportunities to renovate existing athletic facilities as part of major construction projects. We have facilities around the building. Certainly, we built the high school. We got new fields and things of that nature, but with middle school and Russell Street, not quite the same. As a result, we do not have a feature outdoor athletic facility to match the buildings we have constructed. Really don't have that showpiece field in Littleton. We go to other places, and they do have that showpiece field. And for the most part, it's on site at the high school. That might not be a reality for us. And thank you for listening and inviting us.
All right. So as I said at the beginning of it, this was a presentation that Mike Irradiated was given twice, and it specifically at the Board of Selectmen meeting was given to frame the reason why the selectmen were going to consider to accept the in-kind services of Sean Reardon. Sean is here, so I think I'd like to have Sean just, give him a couple comments about what he was offering and what's accepted. So that's already been done. So what exactly are we going to receive for these in-kind services?
We'll see. So my name's Sean Reardon. I'm a vice president at Tetra Tech. We're a 13,000-person engineering firm, worldwide engineering firm. I personally designed the first infill artificial turf field in Massachusetts at Catholic Memorial High School about 14 years ago. It was kind of the field that started all of this. And it was a struggle, an absolute struggle, because you're dealing with the old AstroTurf mindset in it, but it's single-handedly changed the whole look of athletics at the youth level and even at the college level. So I do have a fair amount of experience. I also have a portion of our business is just doing K through 12 schools in the state of New York. So we've done over 30 artificial turf fields. We've done probably over 250 just traditional turf systems. So we have a great body of experience. And it's not just my time. I'm commending the resources of our firm as well. Most of the discussion and most of the dialogue is going to be with me, but I also have the resources of our firm to back us up. Probably the biggest, I think, challenge, I was coming here today and I was like, donating services creates a problem for me. I don't know who I work for. Right? Usually it's pretty easy. Whoever pays you is who you work for. So in this case, I'm trying to kind of work through this. Do I work for the school department? Do I work for the selectmen? Do I work for the athletic department? Do I work for Park and Rec? I think the answer to that is you work for everybody. So my goal here is to just take the resources that I have, the experience that I have, to sort of give some form to the discussion. So I think when you get into dialogues like this, the challenge is people talk at different levels and understand at different depths, and you never kind of get coalesced behind a consistent vision. So I figure what I can bring here is that vision, is just kind of put to paper what everybody's thinking, so people can focus on one particular tool for discussion, and then move from that point forward. Either make a decision to not go forward or make a decision to go forward, and then once you do, start from that point, and it continues to grow beyond that. So what I plan to give the town is just a concept design of a solution. Doesn't mean it will be the solution, but it will represent kind of the consensus opinion of the people that I talk with. It'll address the technical details of some of the things that folks may not understand all that well. And it'll put it on paper so everybody can look at the same thing and can speak to the same thing. In addition to that, I'll be a resource, because I've seen probably a half dozen of these fields built. I've built a half dozen of them personally. We've rebuilt Catholic Memorial's fields. We actually expanded to include a turf baseball field. So we've a good body of experience to fill in some of the gaps that people might have, and also to bring truth to some of the discussions as well. So hopefully we can get to a common point of understanding and we all move forward.
Do you have a timeline that you discussed with the Board of Selectmen in terms of delivery of that? Or
I
is that still
haven't
being
yet,
fleshed out?
but my goal would be, in this business, is the ideal time to be bidding work like this is late fall, so that when if we're talking about Alumni Field, the ideal spot would be for a contractor to have this job in hand, so that when we finish our Thanksgiving Day game, they can go to work.
Of next, you're talking like, obviously
Of next
now, what
year.
you're talking about for next year.
If it's possible, but I would be targeting kind of an October bid period, so that in November, late November, early December, if weather allows, these guys can get a month's worth of work in. Because the challenge you have in all these applications is that there's not really a lot of idle time for these fields. So what you want to do is limit how much time they're out of service. So ideally, what you do is you add that extra month and a half at the end of the previous year's construction season when the field's not being used. Then when the spring comes around, you have the best chance you've got to get the work done before that next cycle comes through.
Thank you. Questions, Alex? Comments?
Sure. So I'm a little confused because the discussion is, we're talking about the proposal. As the skirmisher of the fields, and I think we can all agree, given what we saw, that there is a big need in town for better shape to the athletic fields. We're not talking about synthetic turf, but we are talking about synthetic turf. And because that's what you seem to be the expert in, I have two questions. I know we're not deciding anything tonight, but we did bring it up, and I want to ask him a couple of questions while we have him here.
Well, let me ask you a question. Are you going to ask questions about synthetic turf?
About the design differences. So if we're going out and if we're seeing a proposal take place and design resources, I think it would be good to look at a number of options, because
Sean talked about the fact that his firm does synthetic and natural grass
Exactly.
systems.
Yeah, and let's keep in mind, too, most of the design has nothing to do with the turf system.
which was my first question.
Right, it's the things, what makes it a success is the things around it and how they interact. How do the stands interact with concessions? How do the toilets work? How do the sidewalks work? Really, it's like a carpet selection. That's really what it boils down to. And so it's not this big deal.
Excellent.
It's really, they're both green. Well, I mean, if it's turf, it could be blue, but it's really just a carpet selection. And different strokes for different folks. I'll be honest with you that the only people that really have natural turf fields anymore are really wealthy communities, because they're just so turf systems, the infill turf systems are so overwhelmingly affordable. So, but that doesn't mean it's the right solution here, and we could have a community that's just committed to natural turf. I will say that to get the same use out of an artificial turf field as you do a natural turf, you need like 5 or 6 natural turf fields to match the use you get out of one turf field. And there's plenty of documentation for that, just in terms of hours of use. So, but I think it remains to be seen. The community has to decide what they want. The selectmen will feed into this. You guys will feed into this. And it's just a matter of what's the right choice.
So from a design perspective, there's not a whole lot of difference between the artificial versus the natural turf, except for the turf itself. We don't need the same sort of drainage systems that might have been in place 40, 50 years ago. Or if we do, they're pretty similar field to field.
They function the same way. There are nuances and differences. So the cross section of an artificial turf field is a little bit different than a turf field. Turf field needs loam. An artificial turf field doesn't, but it does need stone. So, but again, you're still talking about it's the carpet analogy. It's the carpet and the underlayment. You might get a different kind of underlayment for the different carpet, but it's still a surface material.
So the designs that we get back would sort of function in a way that they would be useful to us, whichever direction we'd want to go in.
Without question. And frankly, the issues that I look to solve are the things like circulation. I mean, my biggest issue as an engineer is the traffic circulation around that facility. I think what people have to realize is when you transform this facility, it takes on a new feel. Particularly if it becomes an artificial turf surface. It just becomes a center of 10 times more activity. So the issues that maybe you could get away with, the unsafe circulation and the poor parking, when it's not an active place, you can get away with those things. But the minute you transform it into this showpiece or centerpiece, those things get harder to get away with. So,
It's a lot more attention.
so I got actually involved with this with Michael. Partly my first thing is, listen, if we're going to fix this, I want to fix the parking lot. So
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
and for me, there will be no proposal that, my design will show a fixed parking lot. If the town decides they don't want to do it, that's your choice, but, for me, it's a complete solution. So the success of a job for me is how well it works and how efficient you've used your resources. So I think it's great if you build these showpieces, but if they cost twice as much as they probably could have, and accomplish the same thing, I still consider them a failure. So my goal is to solve all the problems in the most economical way, but still give people the kind of experience that they want at the end and the satisfaction that they want at the end.
And I think that's great, and I'm really grateful that you've donated your services and that at the end of the process, we'll have something to look at, because I think you're right with what you said earlier, where oftentimes we'll talk in these abstracts, but unless you see the design in front of you, it's hard to really talk about it. And whether, we've talked about the parking lot a number of times over the years, and having that on paper, I think, would be nice, because maybe the town decides to do it, maybe we don't. That's a discussion we need to have, and it's easier to have an informed discussion when we have those sorts of designs.
The other thing I plan on providing is a cost estimate. So I do a lot of construction, there's a lot of resources that our company has in terms of pricing for things. We can put real numbers to certain things. So instead of someone saying, well, that's going to be $2 million and you can't get it because of this permit and that permit, I'll tell you, no, it's going to cost in this range, and it's permittable, or anything we show will be permittable.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean. This is, it's obviously very generous for you to donate the time, so I think, I'm very appreciative that you're willing to do that. This is the type of thing, and thanks to Mike and Kevin, this is the type of thing where it mainly benefits students, it benefits the town and everyone else as a whole, but unlike school facilities and things like that, the only people who see the deficiencies in the fields and things tend to be students and coaches and things like that. So it's nice to have advocates, at the adult level who are going to come and speak about it, because without that, it probably would never get done. They use it for 4 years, they understand how bad it is, and then they leave. So that's great that that we have someone who's a resource like you in town who can help out with this. I'm excited to see what the proposal you come up with is, because like Alex said, we did have a discussion in town a year or so ago about this topic, and with everything in the abstract, it was too difficult, I think, for everyone to understand what we were actually talking about. And it led to speculation and also, claims that people made about the pros and cons of all the proposals that were out there. So, yeah, thanks again for your participation, and look forward to.
Well, one thing I'd like to ask is I know what I think, what things need to be addressed, but I don't know all of it. So what I request is that anybody that's interested, just write a list of wants, write a list of needs out, and it's very easy to keep track of those. So if someone sends me, I'll give you my business card, just send me an email. And I have access to email forever, right? So I just search an email, I can get an email from 5 years ago. So the key thing is if it gets forgotten, it doesn't get addressed. So what I'd like is that there's a lot of great ideas out there, a lot of thoughts that I don't have access to. So I'd say, please, as much as you can, just give me the benefit of your knowledge and your thoughts as well.
No, thank you very much for the presentation and the donation of services. I've got kind of a couple of different questions here. So, sort of ignoring alumni field for a minute, we have the rest of the fields that we have at the schools here, and quite frankly, I haven't seen a budget number of planned maintenance in any of our presentations. So have we been a little remiss in scheduling major field renovations over time?
The problem in answering that question is that we don't budget field maintenance because we don't do the field maintenance. The field maintenance is done between the highway department and Park and Rec. And we have a tortuous MOU that took a long time to get right.
I remember.
Exactly. Didn't work right. So that's a great question, but I think the only way to answer that question is to sit down with the Board of Selectmen, who is in charge of Highway and Park and Rec, and the schools would obviously be a part of that discussion in order to answer that question.
Yeah, no, I only bring it up because I don't see it on anybody's budget sheet.
Right.
life cycle maintenance of our fields, whether it's every 5
Right.
years to returf them or, you know.
I will tell you that
or
I've
whatever
been,
it is.
right, I've been at meetings with Jimmy Clyde, and you know how, like, we talked last week about custodial coverage and industry standards, of how many people per square foot, and we're underneath it? Jimmy's even farther underneath this industry standard for manpower for square acreage
Right.
than we are in our custodial.
Right.
So he will be the first one to tell you that he's had to make some really difficult decisions about how to allocate resources, and that he's not happy because he knows he's shortchanging, you know, the facilities and the users of the facilities.
And I would assume is really on my part there, that the maintenance that he's doing is purely just cutting and
Some seeding.
and things like that,
Exactly.
not regrading it,
Correct.
not correcting the crown
Correct.
in the fields
Right,
or
right,
or
Right, so I see what you're saying, capital versus
maintenance.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure,
well, like the field, the high school that you showed there clearly needs to be returfed in order to recover all that dead grass that's not going to come back over the, over the spring. So what is the plan to fallow that field for a year? Where's the money to returf it, independent of what kind of turf, but just to bring it up to a reusable state kind of thing there, versus your comment, it's 40 years since Alumni Fields had any attention to it from physical field maintenance. So that's just one thing I think we need to figure out, how to make all the other fields that are not going to be included as part of the primary plan here into some kind of maintainable state, or else we have no feel for how much we need to be setting aside as a town for, basic field improvements. Maintenance isn't quite the right word, but there, you touched on the scope of the plan there. And then the other part, and I appreciate that this was a field presentation, not a turf presentation, because the emails have already started flowing in from people on sort of both sides of the pieces here, and I jotted some notes about a possible process, if you wanted me
Sure,
to just touch on some of those there. Because I think when we eventually get to the discussion, there's a bunch of things people have started identifying: field safety, lead in the field, the heat, the playability, the wear use, the lifetime, the cost, and it ticks off on quite a list there on it. But I tend to not always deal with the emotion side of the presentations. I like to know what the facts are behind them so that we can make an informed decision on it. And I guess what I'll suggest when we get to that phase of the process, which will probably be after your general plan presentation.
I mean, it doesn't have to be. We can, I'm more than happy to provide whatever insight I can at any
Right.
time, because it's an evolving process.
But I think it'd be important for us to try to capture a list of of not the arguments that people are having, but the concerns underneath their arguments, so that we can make sure that those are addressed during any final presentation. And then when people come, they can talk to what the issue is, and then we can look at what, sort of what the facts are in back of the concerns to make sure that they're mitigated or at least addressed before we make a final decision. And,
Yeah, I think that's a
because I
good
think
point.
we could get tied up in too much of just the back and forth of the discussion and not driving through to what the real issue is, and then what can we do to address the concern.
And frankly, coming out of this process, the decision between turf and grass doesn't even, coming out of what I do, doesn't even have to be made.
No, that's what I mean. That's why
Because
maybe
from
the second or
from this
later
design to a
phases.
final design,
Right.
it's almost interchangeable, so.
But
Yeah, I like where you're going towards of not going to the final meeting where there's going to be a vote on funding and go, no-go, and trying to get as a community, our arms around the concerns legitimate concerns that people have, if we can amalgamate those ahead of time and then address them, I think that'll help a lot of people be able to say, I'm in favor of this, or my reservation is that, or whatever it is, and I think that's a great idea, so that's something to keep in mind as we go forward.
yeah. And that's all that I had.
Mark?
I had a couple of comments. One, thank you for donating your services, and I agree that Alumni Field is in poor shape and needs something done. But I have one concern I have is how this whole process is going to work, because it seems like there should be a committee working with you to decide what needs to go in at Alumni Field, and I just don't see where that's happening yet. and I think the selectmen have interest in it, Park and Rec does, the middle school, the community at large does, we do. And it seems like there needs to be more of a formal process around a design.
I think you have a great point, Mark. I think that we need to remember that Sean is not designing a solution. He's going to make a recommendation of a potential solution that is going to allow the community to jump off from there. And in all likelihood, whatever Sean comes up with, no matter how wonderful and/or economical and/or functional it is, that's not what we're going to end up with. The question will be, to what degree do we modify it?
Right.
You know? And I think that the issue you're raising needs to get addressed when we jump off from his, because he's not offering a solution, he's offering a suggestion of a possible solution. And his point that he made, I believe, Sean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the point he made was that when he delivers that, it's going to be a lot easier for us to do exactly as a community what you're asking for. It's going to be a lot easier for the Board of Selectmen, Park and Rec, the Highway Department, School Department, and the Finance Committee to get off and say, oh, okay, I see what you're saying, something along those lines. What if we did that? What if we take that? Can we phase that? All those kinds of things will be a natural progression from the first step that Sean's going to deliver for us.
I understand that to a certain extent, but you're also then having a solution that people are going to start poking holes at and not having comments on.
I'm with you. I mean, frankly, if you guys can get together and like put together a design advisory committee that I can work with, that has a representative from each of the stakeholders, that would be fantastic, because otherwise I'm going to go to each one of you and ask you what you think.
Can I follow up on Mark's question? So, I don't know if you're probably the most appropriate person. The design that you end up recommending or proposing or whatever, I don't know anything about the construction or anything like that, but would we need to then hire another one of you to get us to the end zone?
Without
to
question.
use
Yeah. So
Let me ask you a question, Mark. You were involved in the track project, right?
Yes.
Was there a specific committee made up of all the members of the board you just cited for that project?
We tried to get people involved. We went to all the committees and said, we could try,
so there wasn't.
But there wasn't.
But the track still got built, and it's a wonderful facility, and the town managed to get through that process quite well.
Well, it was extremely painful from the
Well,
track.
by definition, any of those,
No,
yeah,
it
by
was
definition, it's
It was
going to be
extremely painful from the track side, because we were working outside of all of the boards, trying to go to all of them and get it done.
That was the nature of the makeup of some of the people that were involved with trying to get that done, Mark. In all fairness.
I'm not arguing one way or another. I'm saying it was extremely painful to get done that way, and it would be easier to get the boards to buy in as you go along, rather than going to them.
I mean, I don't think Sean's going to do this.
Can
I speak
Right.
freely?
Yeah, and if you can.
I've done this hundreds of times. So the challenge for me, I will solicit input from everybody. It's much easier for me if you as a group designate a point person, if the selectmen as a group designate a point person, and anybody else who wants to be part of it can work through you to add a person to it. If I have 5 people to work with that I know can then take the information back to their group, it makes my job a whole lot easier. So Mark, to your point, you're exactly right. The sooner you can get a group together that can represent the consensus opinion of a unit, then that'd be great for me. But if it doesn't happen, I'm okay with that too. I'll just ping each one of you and keep track of it one at a time.
Could you answer the question though that I had? So when you're done with your volunteer part, what would our next step be then? Say if people are generally on board with your proposal, maybe there are a couple tweaks. Do then we need to hire another one of you to give us like the final?
Yeah, because this project will be well over the $25,000 limit you can buy without a set of bid documents. So you will need a set of bid documents. That's going to cost a fair amount of money. It's going to depend on the scope and scale of the improvements. So part of what I want to do is try to give some form to the scope and scale of those improvements. So one of the big things you need to consider as a group is you're investing a lot of money in any solution. This is going to be the newest field, and it's going to be a congregation center for a long time. How much do you want to do? How fancy do you want to get? How beautiful do you want to make it? I mean, that's probably the biggest decision, is how far do you want to take this? Then once you decide that, then we can figure out, okay, how do we do that? How do we do it so we're not wasting money? If we have to break it up into 2 projects, a Phase 1 and a Phase 2, we want to do Phase 1 in such a way that you don't waste any money transitioning from Phase 1 to Phase 2. That's what we're good at. So hopefully what we can do is kind of give some form to all this, so that we come out of this process with something that, may not represent 100% of everybody's approval, but it's a general consensus opinion going forward. Then the designers that will build the documents will deal with all the details and work through all the final items, and then put that to paper along with a procurement package to go to the market and get prices from contractors. So yes, there is quite a bit of work left to do, but it's fairly fast if you start at a good point. But if you hire a firm and they have to figure all this out and work through all these questions and different agendas, it's going to cost the town twice as much money as it should. So what I'm hoping to do is kind of get a little bit of form to that, so you can hand it to a designer, and then they can proceed efficiently through what they're good at, which is documenting the design and documenting the
The
construction.
fact that those are the services in kind that you're generously donating to the town, that we're going to reap a significant benefit, assuming that it goes forward.
Right.
And if it doesn't, we've also avoided a particular cost, and we just, that's the way it goes. Sorry, Mark, anything else?
The other thing I think generally needs done in town is we really should have a survey of the fields we have and the field needs we have, and a long-term, more of a plan for what we're doing. Like, this plan's targeting alumni field in particular, but as you pointed out, the one field at the school needs substantial work. Kerper could use a rest, right? Do we need more fields in town? If we have a turf field, how many fields does that mitigate in town? What do we actually need so we can actually plan appropriately? And that should be something that the schools and Park and Rec and the selectmen also get together and decide. And I don't see that.
That ask has been made. I know Alicia's worked on that. She's come up to speed with a lot of things that's been asked for.
I think, and Mike could probably talk to this, but Littleton's one of the very few towns in the area that shares the school fields with the youth. Most other towns, the youth kids aren't using other than the football field, which might be, a lot of times it's a turf field, but you don't see that mixed use among the scholastic, the interscholastic fields and the youth. And and clearly right now, we don't have the ability to rest any fields. I work very closely with Jim Clyde too. He would love to be able to take a field offline for a year and redo it. There's no other, we don't have the ability to put those sports that utilize that field in another location, and that's been one of our big issues. And clearly, I think, Mark, as you're pointing out, having a real idea of what the town needs for fields. I mean, I think we all can agree that we don't have enough fields, but what's the real need? And, as I think Sean could talk to, is really what the benefit of the turf field would do, how many fields would that equate to if they were grass and such. So.
And to that point, the discussion of what we need is a much softer discussion, a much harder thing to answer.
Yes.
Right now, the part of the appeal for me in this is it's clear we need it, right? So what I'm putting form to is something that unquestionably is a need, so we don't have to...
I agree with you entirely. I'm just saying, in general, the town needs this, right? Because I think some fields are way overutilized and some are under, right? And some probably just could be reconfigured to be better utilized, right? And I don't know that I've ever seen a survey of anything like that done in town to say what we really need and where.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, it would be good also to not only do an analysis on what we need today, but to project out what's the town's growth look like as a population. Are we getting more children in town or fewer children in town? And, what are the projections out over 10 years? And what are they in 2, 4, 6, and 8, 10 years? Because then you can know, well, we don't need anything right now, but in 6 years, we better start getting ready now for what's going to happen in 6 years. Or, no, we just got to hold on, and then we're going to get some relief. I don't know what the answer is, but that analysis would be worthwhile. Good. Thank you, guys, for that. What I take away from this is that it's evident that Alumni Field as a facility, not strictly as a field, but as a facility, there's some significant issues. We're really victims of our own success. We have so many teams, so many different types of sports that the old configuration can't support it, and we have to do something. And then, Sean, I really like what you talked about: parking, traffic flow, plumbing, just simple plumbing. When you showed the porta potties, that's really ridiculous. that's what we've got. So if we can get an overall solution that addresses Alumni Field, and maybe by virtue of addressing that, create some ancillary benefit to other fields and other facilities, I think we're in great shape. So I'm looking forward to see the result. I think it meets a need that we have, and then once we have an idea of a solution, we can determine how badly we want that versus the other priorities we have in town. So I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to it. I would ask, and I know this is going to happen anyway, but I'll just go on record because you're in front of the school committee. It would be great if you could get with our business manager, superintendent, and maybe the principals at Russell Street in the middle school, because they do deal with the day-to-day issues, Sean, that you talked about. And it sounds like you've got an idea, but if you could just get with them, because they're the ones that are in the trenches every day, as part of the process, that would be great. And then if you guys do that, and there's something that would be worth talking to about us that comes out of that discussion, we'd love to hear it and get an idea of it, in
I'll set that up.
anticipation of what Sean would be incorporating.
Can I add one other thing? When we did the track, we looked at putting the track around Alumni
Yeah.
Field, so there's a lot of designs already in place, the people that have been
Right, I
done with the
remember those,
track
yeah.
there and the parking lot moved. I don't know where they are at, but I'm sure.
I don't know.
But I know the designs and some preliminary numbers were done.
PNBC might very
I
well
believe
have some. of that.
PNBC has them. I've had some preliminary conversation with Joe Calentro, the chairman of the PNBC, to try to find those designs and have those available, and I'll set up a meeting.
Good. Yeah.
The other thought I had was, there's been some speculation about changing the whole parking lot configuration. So not just fixing the parking lot, but different ways of having the traffic flow. Do we want the field on the other side of the traffic flow so people can go directly to Russell Street School from Russell Street without going around the field? There's been some speculation about, I don't know if that's the outside of your generous donation, that's for you to decide.
Well,
But
I will recommend a solution, given my body of experience. Just to that point, it makes no sense to move things around if you can make the current orientation work. Because anytime you move something, it triples your cost. Because you're converting one thing to another use, and you're converting the other thing to that same use. So it's a little counterintuitive for my design aesthetic, but if there are compelling reasons to do it, certainly the town can consider it.
And I think those would come out when you meet with our business manager and our principals, because those discussions have been speculative, I think. I don't think we certainly made a decision, but we thought, oh, what if we considered this? So those would probably come up.
On that note, just to share what I'm thinking, the middle school was done very well. So if my goal would be to take what the middle school has done and kind of carry that through. A similar parking aesthetic, a similar sizing of aisles, a similar circulation methodology. So it's not going to be a whole-scale change. I've already thought through it all. I've already put it on paper. But again, it's my thought as an engineer. The town as the owner has to figure out what's the right solution.
Thank you. Chuck, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to add that Steve may have this, if he doesn't, I think I have a copy of it. When I was in the PNBC as a representative of the school committee, we did invest in some design. So,
I know you did.
So that's just something else you can take a look at and see if incorporate that in.
One last question I have is it out of the question, right, the idea of moving like the feature stadium up to the high school? Has that already been asked and answered?
You can,
12,
As
13
far as-
years ago.
yeah,
Then you have lighting issues.
as far as feasibility, there'd be issues there.
I'd like to take that, I'd like to not address that at the moment, Mike. It's a good question, but
Hold on, let me-
we're going to go down the rabbit
No,
hole.
he's
and
answering the question.
I
Let him answer the
know, I
question.
know, but...
So it's been looked at and...
There'd be issues, we feel like the neighbors, that came up at FinCom.
Lights.
There were substantial issues with the neighbors when they were building the site.
Right.
You started adding lights and sound system,
Yeah, that makes
and it's
sense.
very close proximity to the neighborhood. Whereas Alumni Field really only has one neighbor that's adjacent to the property. So there'd be those issues. We would actually lose field space right now. The slides are gone, but in the fall, we're able to put 4 fields across our back fields there. We go 2 soccer, a full-size practice football, and a full-size field hockey. And we would lose, we would be down 1 field. So it would be tricky to fit everything. But from an athletic standpoint, logistically, having your feature stadium on site, I can't, I was very much against, at one point, 5-6 years ago, when this first came up, when the track was being discussed, against putting a feature field down where it is, but we've looked at it, we've thought about it. I don't see any other answer. Logistically, though, will put us into a transportation issue for now and forever,
Right.
that we have to get kids safely from the high school to the middle school. For, obviously, if this becomes a feature field, we're going to be using it a lot more. Just one other closing point while I have the floor. The slideshow and everything, I had a meeting with Kelly and Mike, and just want to be clear that I've been working for the schools for 15 years. I've been the athletic director for 10. I've been the football coach for 14, so I've been coaching that field. By no means am I the voice of the schools, but I am, myself and Kevin and Sean, we were the people that rebooted this kind of version 2.0 of the turf, and we felt like if we did nothing, that's what would happen, is nothing. And now, through tonight and the first 2 meetings, we're making progress, this dialogue. I'm going to be, give me a high five here, Sean. You're taking over from here, okay? I'll be sitting where Kevin is the next time that we come to school committee or Board of Selectmen. The expert on site improvement and all these other things will be taking over. And if there's questions about programming or things of that nature, then I'll be there, but Sean will be the point person moving forward. And whether he knew that or not before tonight, now he knows it for sure. So,
I anticipated it.
And do keep in mind, this is donated time on my part, so if I'm not as responsive as you would like, just keep in mind there's a ton of people out there that pay me to be responsive. So
From the disclaimers, I knew nothing's free.
disclaimers all over the place.
and what this
Things that
does
are
cover,
free.
there's an emotional attachment to me, for me. Both my kids play lacrosse, and both my kids experience that, and it's embarrassing. So, I will be doing everything I can to make this work for everybody. So,
We appreciate that, thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Mike,
Yes.
I meant to say this during Interactive Citizens. On Thursday, for Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
can we make sure that the buses are moved from
Yes.
the middle school site?
Yes.
Not over to the middle school, though.
Yes.
because Last year, they went to the middle school
Yes.
parking lot. There's a breakfast there, and that's where we park for our Thanksgiving.
I've already jumped on it.
Awesome.
Yep.
Where are they going?
Probably town hall.
Someone from-
All right, thank you, guys.
Parking.
All right, feel free to stay for the Mcas presentation.
And policy discussion later.
It will bust.
Nails run.
All right, jumping into the Mcas presentation?
They notice no.
We'll watch it eat my holes.
Yeah, I can do that. Well, folks, every year, we take the opportunity to look at our MCAS results and illustrate to the school committee and the community what we do with these results. First of all, we take these results very seriously. They are one measure of student assessment, but what's nice about this measure is it goes on longitudinally for a period of time. As you all know, MCAS and PARC have been in the news for many months, and we certainly have had a lot of discussions in those areas. And later on this evening, after we do the MCAS presentation, we'll start the conversation about the 2016 testing format that we may want to choose. You'll notice on the front page we've included principal failure on there, and that's for a good reason. Our MCAS testing starts at grade 3, but the students from Shaker Lane, when they come to Russell Street School, need to possess the right skill sets to move forward. So it would be not appropriate for us to leave Principal Faraday out of the discussion. So they are involved in seeing the results of the data analysis, and that holds true from grade 5 to 6 and grade 8 to 9. That transition period is very important in creating that continuity of success for all students. Our presentation this evening is obviously a thematic approach. I'm going to start with the overview of MCAS and look at statewide results and touch on the district level a bit. And then we're going to take a look at Littleton Public School in particular, process, protocols, and our next steps. Then we'll go into the school-by-school results. We have some tables and diagrams, so hopefully you won't get too glossed over with all the numbers that we're presenting to you. That's not our intent this evening. To start off, we administer 17 Mcas exams a year, and that's via state statute. And we've been doing this for a number of years now. And as I've said before, we've been able to trace some history. What we've done in the last 5 years, though, is developed more of a consistent process that we use to look at results, not only in aggregates, but in subgroups and student-to-student results. The addition of SGP, student growth percentiles, made a tremendous difference in our ability to use these results on a more personalized basis in terms of student achievement from year to year. If we look at overall achievement, and this is in the state, in English language arts, you can see the increased proficiency levels, and I'm not going to read them all to you since you have it in your package. But it's important to note that Littleton Public Schools perform better than state average in all of the tests that were given. So I wanted to make sure you understood that. Now, we have discussions about, we have a split. It's not a 50-50 split, but we have some districts that jumped on the Park last year. We chose to stay with Mcas. The state has done some statistical tweaking, for lack of a better word, to make sure that the samples were representative enough for us to use these results in a meaningful way.
I'm not so sure there's not a better word, but...
I chose that very carefully. But the point is, we spent a lot of time talking about population numbers and demographics, and we could spend a long time talking about what is statistically appropriate for a sample population. And when you start competing for exams, obviously it does have an effect, in my opinion, on reliability and validity levels. So in 2 years that'll be taken care of, because we'll all be writing the same exam, and it will be the hybrid Mcas is the name that I'm using this evening. I'm going to stay away from 2.0. Now, if we look at the statewide results again, we started the Mcas in 2007. And you can see for the most part, we've seen increases across the state in proficiency levels, with the exceptions of grade 4 in both math and ELA. And you've heard me talk about grade 4 on a number of occasions. From 2007 to 2015, we still remain somewhat flat with grade 4 students throughout the state. I do have some training in testing design, in fact, quite a bit of training in testing design. And my opinion on this is if it continues from year to year over a prolonged period of time, we need to start taking a look at the cognitive expectations for those students at that grade level. Something's not working. If it was working, we wouldn't have a consistent flat line for that period of time. So I'm hoping the state takes a look at that seriously and make some adjustments in terms of what appropriate cognitive expectations are at that level. And it's interesting because it doesn't show up in grade 3, but all of a sudden in grade 4, there it is, and it hasn't changed for quite a few years. Now, when we look at our results, and we look at our percentage of students above proficiency in advanced categories, as I've said before, this is ELA. We're above state average in all of those subject areas. There's some that are above the state more than others. And grade 3 reading, for example, 79% of our students are proficient or advanced. At the state level is 60%. And if we look at grade 5 ELA, 81% of our students are proficient or advanced compared to 71% in the state. And Grade 10 ELA, 98% of LPS students are proficient or advanced as compared to 91% in the state. We move on to mathematics. Again, we're above the state average in terms of proficiency or advanced rates for all of the subject areas. Grade 3 math, 84% of our students are at or above proficiency levels, compared to 70 in the state. And again, even if we look at grade 4 math, 64% of our students are proficient or advanced as compared to 47 in the state. Quite a difference. Grade 5 mathematics, we had a jump this year. 85% of our students are proficient or advanced compared to 67% in the state. Fairly strong showing in our elementary grades in mathematics. When we go into middle school, that spread closes somewhat. And then when we get to grade 10 again and look at our levels, 95% of our students are proficient or advanced as opposed to 79% in the state. We take a look at two-year comparisons. And please remember that they're grade-by-grade comparisons. They're not cohort comparisons. We do that as well. And it's one of the strengths of our analysis is we not only do grade to grade, we do cohort throughout their journey within Littleton Public Schools. And in our district report this year, you can actually see that trend where we followed one class right through to the end of high school. And obviously, you would expect some variance from grade to grade because we don't have 1,000 or 2,000 students in each grade. We have around 100 as an average. And you can see those variances for the last 2 years. And again, grade 5 ELA, we jumped 11 points in proficiency or advanced. So that's a significant jump, and the rest, fluctuate. If we look at mathematics, going down to grade 5, again, we jumped 14 points. So grade 5 had a real strong year this year, and we're very, very impressed, very pleased. We've been trying some different things at Russell Street School. If you recall our conversations over the past couple of years, that's been one of my target areas to work with the principal and staff and figure out why we were at a plateau. And we've seemed to break that plateau within a little over a year of trying new things, which is pretty fast for any change within a school. Usually you don't see results for 2 to 3 years, and we've managed to see results after the first year. Department-based Mcas analysis. Well, we do an item analysis on all these tests. As I mentioned earlier, we take a look at group demographics and the analytics of the group, subgroup, and student to student. And we talk a lot about item analysis, and really what that means is developing a target deviation. And when your students answer that question, we have individual profiles for each question in terms of how our students performed as compared to the state. So if it's a multiple choice test with 4 particular answers from A to D, we can take a look at how many of our students chose A and how many students in the state chose A as an answer. And it gives us some real good information to take a look at our curriculum and our instructional design and also our sequencing from year to year. So if we see a void in grade 4, for example, these exams give us that opportunity to take a look at our curriculum and our instructional approaches and allows us to reflect and revise and tailor them to meet the voids that we may find. Sometimes we find strengths. All the time we find strengths. But when I think back to the MAP testing, you'll notice that some of the challenges all of a sudden became strengths in later grades. And that's to be expected. If you find an area that's a challenge, you work on that area and you bring that area back up. And as a result of that, there's always going to be another area that's going to fall into that challenge slot. That's just the way that it works when you're doing comparisons like that. Our departments, I don't like calling them departments, I'm going to use the word curriculum coordinators. We have elementary curriculum council, K to 5, And then 6 to 12 curriculum coordinators. They're very heavily involved with their staffs as well as the principals in doing the analysis of Mcas and then talking about those results and setting goals as teachers, and also taking a look at students that are at risk and making sure that those programs are tailored to maximize the opportunity for all of our students to be successful. A little more details on this page. And again, I'm not going to go through them all, but you can see that we always do an extensive review. And I'm very proud of the process that we've developed. It's certainly come a long way in the past 5 years. And when students get into grade 9, we all understand that they need to pass a science MCAS. So we've tailored a couple of courses for students that were targeted in grade 8 that needed some extra support in mastering the framework or the standards within the framework. And so we have a Foundations of Biology and Integrated Science course that allows them to beef up those skills so that they're ready to write the MCAS exam. And that is the introduction. Does anybody have any questions about district results before we go on school to school?
Start to listen more. Good.
So I'll do mine now, and then we'll have to do them with the principals. So I was looking at a couple of them, and I think right around charts 7 and 8 were the two that I started focusing on a little bit here, where you talk about the statewide pieces here. And could you comment a little bit more on, I think you mentioned a little bit about at grade 4, both math and ELA, statewide, have been struggling and still decreasing. And then I think, looking at our scores later, it looks like our community reflects the same thing.
It does.
So it's really not clear that, is it a testing problem or is it a curriculum introduction of, pieces there? Because it's hard to fix a problem if it's going to be systemic throughout the whole state.
Well, it is.
I'm trying to understand what's your thoughts on the underlying problem there.
It is systemic throughout the state. So, as I mentioned earlier, I feel very strongly that it's not a pedagogical issue. I mean, can we always look at ways of doing things differently? We have. So I would chalk it up to more of a differentiation in cognitive expectations for that particular age group. I mean, I've been in different states as an educational leader in provinces, and have been subjected to a lot of standardized testing in my career. So I've seen these trends before in different grades, and usually what happens is there's I call it a cognitive misalignment. But when we look at Russell Street School, one of the things that we've done is I've looked at the history of the grade 4 team over years, and we have had changes in staffing. We've had retirements, et cetera, and we've moved more new people in. We've done some looping, which resulted in a couple of teachers throughout the last 5-6 years moving down into another grade. So what we're trying to do now is ensure that we stabilize as much as we can that staffing in grade 4. I think that's one area that I've identified, and so has Principal Bazidlo. We need to solidify that team and then work with that team in continuing to professionally develop their skill sets to see if we can't be one of the school districts in this state that overcomes the trend that's lasted for 8 years. And I'm not going to say we can't do that, because I'm very optimistic, as you know. And I'm very impressed with our MAP testing, as you can attest to from the last meeting. And I'm hoping that the results of the MAP testing itself will take a look diagnostically of what we're doing in those classes in terms of instructional strategies and assessment strategies. So I'm not prepared to solely say that it's a cognitive mismatch. I still think we need to spend some time in doing a few things here to see if we can't get over that bump.
Oh, thank you. And then I think the other one was still using chart 8. It's kind of interesting as you look down I look down the LPS, which is Advanced and Proficient column there, and then you see the transition into grades 6, 7, and 8. there's a significant drop-off in terms of the pieces there. And that's also when we changed math programs and we changed a whole bunch of other things for the students at that level there. But it also seems to be reflected statewide that there's a drop, but not quite as significant as ours. Have you looked at, or any thoughts on that, or is that a later
Well,
video?
I mean, I can certainly speak to that, and Principal Branco will be speaking to that much more in terms of action plans. We have put in place for this year, first time, I think, ever, or for many, many years, we've managed to rearrange staffing and utilize a reading specialist. So we've used some map testing and Mcas results, and we've identified students that we feel need some type of extra attention in the area of ELA. We haven't done that before. We've been doing that with math for a couple of years now, well, more than a couple, 5 years now, and we are seeing some results. It's something as a superintendent, as I'm sure Principal Branco will attest to, we do have conversations quite a bit, and I'm sure he would rather that I not have those conversations, but what I'm looking for is better performance. And I know it's only one assessment, and I see a lot of other things where the school is really moving forward on in terms of assessments in ELA and math. But as we continue to move forward, I'm hoping to reap the benefits of the interventions that we're putting in place. And again, the map testing and that link to MyPass that we talked about last meeting with Edgenuity, I think is going to start making a difference. And bear in mind, middle school throughout the world is a very challenging time for students, and there are multiple variables and factors that are involved. But these charts in itself don't give justice to some of the progress that we've actually made at the middle school, and I'm going to have Principal Branco talk about that during his section.
Okay. Thank you.
Mike, any questions on the chart? Alex?
All right, thank you. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Principal Zidlow.
You want this up here?
Yeah. Clicker's right here.
Okay, you're good.
Good evening. I always appreciate the opportunity to talk about teaching and learning at Russell Street School. As always, I'd like to thank our teachers and our students for the fabulous work that they do. Once a year we come and we talk about Mcas, and each year I talk about it being a moment in time, a couple days a year, 3 and 5th grade, where we take a look at the work students do. But there's 180 days of school and a lot of different ways that we look at student success at Russell Street. But I do want to take a moment to talk about the Mcas particularly. If you've gone through the packet, in general, the way I would characterize our Mcat scores this year are they're slightly up. I've talked for a couple of years about them being flat. So I think that we're slightly up this year, and we'll talk about why potentially that is, with the caveat that, from year to year, they're up a little, they're down a little. You're never exactly sure why that is. We're going to try to replicate some of the things that we think might be why they're up. But if you look at the first slide here, and I apologize, there's a whole lot of numbers on this first slide, and I'll try to go through it with you. The first part here is 2013, 14, and 15. The first thing it shows you is the percentage of students who are advanced and proficient, and the number in parentheses, is the growth percentage school-wide. So if you look specifically from 2014 to 2015, in ELA, you see that we went up from 74% to 75%. Proficiency, advanced and proficient, and our growth scores went up from 41 to 45. In math, we went from 74% to 79%, and our growth scores went from 47 to 58. And in science, we don't have growth scores because 5th grade is the first year that we do the science Mcas, and our advanced and proficiency level went from 69 to 74. Our current school improvement plan goals are 80% proficiency. You'll note that we're approaching them school-wide. And that, as the superintendent indicated, the biggest area that we saw growth this year was mathematics school-wide, and particularly in 5th grade, and we'll talk about that. There's also a pretty significant jump there in science that we were pleased with. As the state would indicate, growth scores over 40 to 60 is considered moderate growth, 61 and higher is considered high growth. We're always looking for moderate growth. So we would like to see growth scores that are 40 and above. You'll notice for the last 3 years in all subject areas, all of those growth scores school-wide at least hit the minimum of moderate growth. We're pleased to see that. We'd like to see it a little bit higher than some of those low 40s, but we're pleased that they're moderate growth. When you get to areas of relative strength, there's a few big wins here, and the first one I'll point out is our Title I students. Those are students in those subject areas that are not students who have been identified for special education, so they're students who struggle in those areas. They might be challenging for them, but they don't have a disability in those areas. You'll notice that the percentage of students in ELA that are advanced or proficient went up 25%, and the growth percentile for those students went up 24%. And in math, the percentage of students that were advanced or proficient went up 25%, and the growth percentage went up 13%. That's a huge win for us. If you recall, I talked last year about our advanced students having tremendous growth scores in the building and having some concerns about our students who were more struggling learners. And so that's a big win for us. It's still an area that we want to work on. 66 and 68% isn't where we'd like it to be, but we're certainly headed in the right direction there. The next thing you'll see is ELA and math broken out and disaggregated between non-high needs and high needs subgroups. You'll remember that the high needs subgroup contains not only students with disabilities, but students with low socioeconomic status and students who potentially speak another language. So that's multiple subgroups fall into the high needs group. ELA non-high needs students, 87% advanced and proficient, up slightly, 3%, and their growth percentile remained the same at about 45.5%. High needs students in ELA, 45% advanced and proficient, that's down slightly, and their growth percentage is 38%, that's up 7%. So you see that it's slightly below that moderate cutoff at 40, but you see growth. It's up 7 percentile points there. Math non-high needs students at Russell Street School, 90% advanced and proficient, up 4, and 64% student growth percentile, up 14 points school-wide. And high needs math students, 50% advanced and proficient, up 3 points, and their growth score is 50, and that's also up 14 points. So our high needs math students grew 14 growth points, equal to the non-high needs math students. I feel like those numbers stand out. 14 growth percentage points is a huge win. So you see some real wins there in the areas of relative strength. Excuse me. As we look at areas for consideration, our math open response scores have grown. We feel pretty good about them now. They're not listed there, but they are. We're feeling like they're doing pretty well. We still want to look at our ELA open response scores. You see how they fall significantly below the multiple choice percentiles at each grade level. So 46, 40, and 57%. We're losing an awful lot of points on open response questions. Those are 4-point possible questions. That's basically indicating that if you got 50%, you're averaging 2 points on your open response questions. So at each grade level, in grade 3 and 4, we're averaging less than 2 points, and at 5th grade, slightly higher than 2 points. So we want to keep working on that. The other one's not really a concern, but it's an area for consideration, and this is one of our big wins this year. You look at our grade 5 disaggregated math results, excuse me, 87% of grade 5 students were proficient or advanced in mathematics. That's a 23% increase from 4th grade, and their growth percentile was 70. Up 17 points from grade 4. That's the biggest increase in the 4 years that I've been here. Those are the results that and I'll talk about this later, but we will attempt to replicate, probably not results that are that stark next year. That was a cohort of kids that I think were really ready for a developmental pop, but similar results in 4th grade next year. In 5th grade again, and in 4th grade next year. To Darrell's point a little bit, we're going to take the model that we piloted last year in 5th grade and see if we can replicate to some degree in 4th grade this year. So that's work that's going on. And I'll talk more about that model in the future, but we were very, very pleased to see those results. One of the things I've talked about in front of this committee previously is, in my opinion, some of the hardest working, most talented teachers I've ever had the pleasure to work with at Russell Street School, and not seeing the results in this kind of assessment that I think that our students should get and our teachers should see. So to see these kinds of results in pockets is nice for morale. It's nice for teachers to see their hard work paying off. And like I said, it pays off in a whole lot of ways. Our students are extremely successful, but to see some real pops was nice. As you look at our grade level, proficient or higher, and growth percentiles broken out, grade 3, 81 and 85%. Grade 3, reading and math, there is no growth percentile in grade 3. It's the first time our students take the test. Students have traditionally been pretty successful on the grade 3 Mcas. I think that has a lot to do with the work that's done at Schcmte as well as in grade 3. The other thing, to Daryl's point a little bit, that there is a huge drop-off. Statistically, the state has come out and said that the grade 4 test is the most difficult test in the battery, all the way from grade 3 to grade 10. In ELA, it's the first time students see the long composition, which is wound into their ELA score. So that plays into it. And the other thing to remember is two things. The pace of curriculum and the pace of instruction from grade 3 to grade 4 is drastically different. The amount of material that needs to be fit into those 180 days. So for students to really try to get through all of the curriculum, if there's anybody who needs reteaching or needs additional help meeting a standard, that's the first year that it really picks up pace. And the test itself, when you look at those 4-point open response questions that I referred to, the third grade test only has one. And when you get to fourth grade, you start to have multiple of those questions where you need to read a piece of literature or look at a math problem and answer that question and explain your thinking and writing. So the actual types of questions that you need to answer become more challenging beginning in fourth grade. So there is some discrepancy from third to fourth and moving forward about the types of questions that students need to answer. We certainly would like to see, and I'm going to jump ahead to fifth grade and show you that in fifth grade, similar to third, 82% proficient or higher in ELA, 87% in math, 74 in science. Again, excellent growth scores, 46 in ELA, and there's that 70 in math, which is a tremendously high growth score for a whole grade. But if you drop back to fourth grade, we're seeing 63 and 65. You'll remember in the slide the superintendent showed, those fourth grade scores have a similar gap. They're similarly strong above the state as the other two grades are. But we would certainly like to see our students perform better than that, and we're working closely with our fourth grade teams to think about what we can do. But you'll notice those growth scores, 45 and 50, coming out of fourth grade are pretty strong growth scores. So although our advanced and proficient percentages aren't as high as we might like, our growth scores are stronger than last year. If you recall, last year, in at least one subject, we had a growth score that wasn't as strong as we would have liked in fourth grade. So we are seeing some improvement there. I'm going to relatively quickly go through these cohort slides. They're pretty similar to the slides I've gone through with the committee previously, and what they generally show in a nutshell is what you just saw in this year's slides. Students performing at about 80%, 75, 80% proficiency in third grade, dipping in fourth, and coming back up in fifth grade. And in the growth scores, pretty much between 50 and 60% of students having at least moderate growth. So we'll go through those. This is this year's sixth grade. What you're looking at is the dark blue and light blue showing advanced and proficient. A little over 80%, dropping down to 70 in grade 4, and then back up to 80% in grade 5. These are a little tough to read on the screen. These are new slides from the state this year that are showing growth bands. Basically, the three darkest colors of green are showing very high, high, and moderate growth. So if you take the cutoff at the third color of green, that's really where we want our students. So in grade 4, it was 50% of students, and in grade 5, it was about 55% of students in those bands of growth. This is mathematics, current grade 6. Same thing, you see about 82% dropping down to about 65 and back up to 83 or 84% proficient and advanced. And maybe 68% growth, and then in grade 5, up to about 78%. This is current grade 5 ELA. In grade 3, you see them up at about 78% proficient and advanced, dropping down to about 62, 63. Now remember, for these guys, we only have 1 year of growth data, but we see them at about 55% moderate or higher growth. This is current grade 5 mathematics, starting at about 82% proficient and advanced, dropping down to mid-60s, and about 62% of students at least moderate or higher growth. As we think about next steps at Russell Street School, as I indicated, we're very pleased to see the results we saw this year. Our goal is to think about what did we do and what can we replicate. I've talked multiple times about the fact that we've shifted our mindset a little bit about what we're doing. We've broken away from the idea that we need to teach a program from cover to cover. We're breaking the standards apart, making sure students understand what the standards are. They're posted in every classroom in student-friendly language. I can do this, or I should be able to do this at the end of this lesson, so that students are taking ownership and understanding what the expectations are. Teachers are often using formative exit tickets at the end of each lesson so that they're knowing what students can do that day and who they need to reteach. We're going to support the use of our Journeys reading and writing program, which we rolled out in full form this year, which has significantly higher rigor in our in literature. We're going to continue to address our ELA open response protocols through goals and regular instruction for students. I believe in the future we'll consider some supplemental writing resources. While Journeys has strong writing resources, I believe writing instruction K-5 is an area that we'll need to continue to work on to improve our long composition and open response writing. So right now our teachers are using a new math program and a new ELA program this year, so it's not something we'll look at right now. But I do believe down the road, we've gone to some high-performing schools and seen a supplemental program that I think we'll probably take a look at as something that may be a support for our staff. Rigor will continue to be important, both with fiction and nonfiction. I think it's important that we continue to expose all of our students to rigorous grade level material while we support them. I talked about the I can statements. We'll continue to expose students to them and expand our use of them. So last year we started with the pilot of making sure they were posted. This year we're talking about making sure we're talking about them multiple times throughout the day before we get to that subject, so that students are dialoguing about them and knowing what is expected of them. We're going to expand the use of exit tickets, formative assessment, and reteaching. We're going to pilot the grade 5 math model in grade 4. And so grade 5 last year piloted sort of really building from the ground up how they were teaching mathematics, or from the top down, really looking at the standard and what was expected of their students, taking a look at the resource, their main resource, which was everyday mathematics, and then pulling in multiple other resources and creating units that they felt would meet their students' needs, and really aligning them to their I can statements, using exit tickets regularly, and reteaching and teaching in a workshop model. So they either broke into small groups and taught the main lesson to each group in small group instruction, or they taught the main lesson to the big group and then broke into small groups, and there were multiple stations for students to work on those I can statements and that standard. And interestingly, each teacher did it slightly differently, and each teacher had very similar growth scores in her classroom. So it's important to me that we preserve teacher autonomy and that teachers have the ability to do what they need to do with their students, but that we see what the main components were of that pedagogy and methodology. And so we're working on that with grade 4 this year. In fact, coming up soon, grade 4 teachers are going to observe grade 5 teachers, and we have some sharing going on. Like I said, we would never expect, and I've said to grade 5 actually, I wouldn't expect them to replicate the scores they saw last year. I don't want teachers to feel that kind of pressure, but I think it'll be important to see, was it a group of students who just happened to have, all cylinders fire one year, or did we, hit something that, is going to be something that will work every year. I've mentioned over and over that for the quality of teachers that we have at Russell Street School and the quality of students that we have in Littleton, there's no reason that our students shouldn't be growing significantly more than the average in the state. And so I think we see that in grade 5 math, and it's my hope that we've unlocked a little secret that's going to help us in the future. So that's something to be a little excited about. We're going to continue to work on our math curriculum maps, continue with Achieve 3000, which you remember is a electronic nonfiction resource, and we're going to increase vertical collaboration. That starts with the grade 4 and grade 5 collaboration that I mentioned. And near and dear to my heart is we will continue to balance achievement with social and emotional learning. I think that we can never lose sight of how important it is and how dedicated we are in Littleton is to making sure that our students are strong socially and emotionally and strong citizens, and that achievement, as you'll see at the end of this presentation, and as it always has, takes care of itself in Littleton, and that our students are always strong achievers. And that doesn't mean that we don't want to do our part with that, but we also want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the role that we play in helping students learn how to take care of each other and take care of themselves. So we're pleased with the work we did this year. Again, 1 year, one moment in time. I didn't take it too seriously last year, and I'm not going to take it too seriously this year, but certainly better to be on the side of some plus signs than some minus signs. Happy to answer some questions.
Alex?
Thank you. I say this, I think I said this is the third year I've said this, but I love that we're talking about SGP, about student growth, instead of the raw scores. And that's a change that the state only made a couple of years ago, and I think we've embraced it fully. And it's wonderful that we're focusing on the student and how they're doing relative to how they've done in the past and how they've done with their peers who are actually their peers and not just the raw average of students. I'm really excited about the areas of growth, about the high SGP growth that you saw. And what I really liked was how we saw those huge gains, especially in those with those Title I students who struggle. Seeing those gains is really important, especially early on, as you know. And that was one of your points last year, was we need to keep working on this, and it looks like that paid off. So congratulations to you and your team. And I'm also hearing, I'm not hearing tonight anything like, okay, we did it, we're done.
Yeah,
I'm
no.
hearing we've made some great gains, we still want to do more, and I don't want to send you back out there to do more, but I think your school's closed at this point.
Yeah,
But,
thank you.
It's really good to hear and really exciting. I had a question, but I think you already hit it because it's escaping me. But I was really, really excited to see the gains.
Great,
You don't
thanks.
blame that on Scott, not on yourself for forgetting it?
I'm giving him credit.
kind of moments on him, I'll tell you that right now.
Giving him the credit.
Yeah.
Very good.
The fifth grade, I don't know what the term is, explosion, I guess.
Progress, yeah.
Progress is what the educator would call it.
Wade.
The uneducated would call it an explosion on the chart. Do we have in here, I was trying to find through, I was trying to peruse this to try and find, do we have how the state performed in fifth grade compared to how was there a similar increase statewide? Because what I'm trying to figure out is whether or not we're putting too much emphasis on the strategies that led to the boom in fifth grade, and whether that is the test, because you talked about how the fourth grade test is so much more difficult than
Yeah, I
fifth grade.
think those are
Do
in
we
the
have-
superintendent slides.
Okay.
Great question.
And do we have other supporting evidence to show that there's something different in our fifth grade this year?
Well, our
That-
student growth scores are 70. As a grade level, the average growth score in our fifth grade is 70. So moderate growth is 40 to 60. Anything over 61, the state considers high growth. So on average, our students grew faster than 69% of students who had the same scores as them the year before.
All right, so that's broad, that's state.
That's the SGP.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And
So I wasn't
actually,
clear what the SGP was. Right, so I-
69% of students who had the similar scores to them in third and fourth grade,
Okay.
they grew faster than 69% of them as a whole grade.
All right, yeah, I wasn't clear that it was the
Yeah.
whole grade. I thought it was just our cohort.
Yeah, and what I didn't put in there, I don't think, is that our students with disabilities in grade 5 had a SGP in the 60s, which is an almost unheard of SGP. And so something that's going on, or went on with that cohort of students last year, was really strong. But this is math, grade 5. Oops. This state went from 47 to 67, and we went from 64 to 85. Now remember, these numbers are slightly different from my numbers, because these numbers include all students in the district. So students who are outplaced and everything. Dr. Jamin and I were having a little trouble jiving why her numbers, and really it was because when you look at this one, why grade 3 reading was a 79 and not an 81, I was a little like, why am I not getting my 80, you know? And it's because it includes all students. So you see a similar 20-point proficiency growth there, but that 70 growth for an average in a grade is
That's isolated,
tremendous.
yeah.
Tremendous.
So let me reemphasize the difference between district and school. I spent some time on district slides, which include students that are not in our school district, but they were called their home district. The school-based reports refer to those students that are in our classes. So just so you know the difference, and I think that's important that we understand the differences, and especially the media understands the differences as well. For us to use these results in a meaningful way, we need to take a look at the students we have in our classes and look at their progress.
I just had one question on the Title I needs, high needs and non-high needs. And are the raw numbers, do you have statistically significant, or is just the growth? I mean, it seems, do you have enough students to fit in the bucket that you can say that you're making progress without just looking at their growth?
The subgroup, they won't calculate numbers for the subgroup unless there's 40 students. So that just gives you a ballpark of where you're at. But I think, as the superintendent indicated, in Littleton often in a grade level, one student is a percent. So you always have to take that with a grain of salt. But that's pretty. Those Title I numbers are pretty significant. 25%. Even if that was only 40 kids, we feel pretty good to be plus 25%. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But your point is well taken that, and we often remember that when we're minus 10%, that might only be 10 kids. So it's good to keep us balanced when it's plus as well. Okay. We're quick to point out that it's only one student per percent when we're on the other side.
All right, great. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks.
Good evening. It's tough to follow you this time, huh? That's pretty good. I do want to say that, we all have our own little spin on the intro, I guess, when we come up here. We talked a lot at the middle school recently about how the Mcas provides us with really strong data points to help us better understand and meet the needs of our students. You've heard each one of us maybe politicize a little bit, that it's one day, one snapshot, one picture in time, but it's a really important one. In combination with all the other assessments we give, it is one of them. But, the faculty and the staff at the middle school have really talked a lot about the results. Overall, as Scott alluded to at his school, you look at that overall picture. Overall, we have very consistent data over the past couple of years at the middle school. So with that said, within that consistency, we have many areas of success that I'm going to point out tonight, and we actually have a few areas that we need to continue to focus on. I think the best statement I can make about this year's data is that there are no surprises. And I think in any organization, that's a comfortable statement, and I don't mean comfortable as a negative term. It's nice to know when you sit down with faculty and staff and you look at numbers and you realize those numbers aren't widgets, but it's someone's child, that there are no surprises. We looked at the names, we looked at the data, and we were able to comfortably understand how the numbers came to be. And that has to be really important when you analyze data. This is not a company making something. They're people's children, and the product is growth in children. So, when we tear all this apart in a slideshow tonight and talk about numbers, I'm going to continuously, at the middle school level, focus on kids by name, because that's a really important thing to me. So when you look at the overall first slide, really nice work in ELA over the past few years. We consistently stay above 80% 3 years in a row. If you have not memorized the middle school SIP, I will remind you that there is a goal of 90% in there. We want to earn the A. And so we're proud of the fact that we continuously have 80% of our students overall in proficient and advanced in English language arts. But we, as a staff in ELA, have really talked a lot about pushing that envelope all the way up to 90%. They get there at the high school level. That's fantastic for us as a district. We'd love to get there earlier. So that's our goal. But you cannot minimize the fact that consistency at the 80% level over time, particularly when the 7th grade, if you have a 7th grader or have had one, take a daunting long composition test. That 4th grade and 7th grade tests are tough tests and tough years for kids across Massachusetts. And so to be consistent over time there is really important to me. We have a goal of 80% in math and science. We are well aware that those numbers are down. They're not down in science. Science is only tested in 8th grade, so compared to past years, it's really tough to do comparative data when you have a 3-year gap where you don't test children. So we look at individual kids when it comes to the science results. The math test is given every single year. I'm going to speak, somebody asked a question about math earlier. I will speak to the math in a few minutes on a couple slides ahead and talk about what's happening, in my opinion and in the opinion of the faculty, and then how we're going to talk about that a little more. We have a goal of 51%. We want 51% of our kids to be, sorry, let me rephrase that. We want all of our students to be at least 51% moderate or very high. And so right now, we're right there. We have almost 50% of our kids in ELA at the moderate to very high student growth. And in math, and this is where I take two pieces of data and I ask you to thoughtfully look at them. So you've got SGP data and you've got achievement level data. And I will tell you definitively that you cannot increase your achievement data until you grow. So to know that we have 54% of our students overall are showing moderate to very high growth, that number has continued to increase at the middle school. Students by name are growing. They were in a deeper hole. We've made curriculum shifts, we've made staffing shifts. Over time in this particular school, we have continuously adjusted math to be responsive. We've leveled it, we've added resources, we've added program changes with intervention and upper level programming. All of that continues to happen, and it is translated to a large percentage of our kids being in that moderate to very high. If you hang with that long enough, it's going to translate to achievement data. It takes time. We were in a different place and a higher place in ELA. And so that's why those numbers are a different place right now. Some areas of strength that we are proud of in relationship to growth and our achievement levels. 82% of our 7th graders this past year are in proficient or advanced. That is an increase. You'll see it on the cohort slides. That particular group of kids went up 5% as a cohort. That's a big jump at the middle school level with a lot going on at that age bracket. 87% of our 8th graders, proficient and advanced, as a group, individually, they went up 7% as a cohort, which you'll see in the cohort slides later. So that's really, really nice data right there for our 7th and 8th graders who are now our 8th graders and our 9th graders. When it comes to growth in 6th grade ELA, 51% of our students were at the moderate to very high, 54% of our ELA students moderate to very high, 55% in math. Look at 8th grade math, 59%. We're growing in math, absolutely growing in math. It's going to take a little more time because of where we started, but there's definitive data that shows we're growing, and the number will continuously go up. I'm confident of that with the changes and implementations we've made, and that achievement number is going to eventually move up similarly as the growth. 8th grade ELA, these next 4 bullets are so important because we have talked about struggling learners for so long and the importance of hyper-focusing on kids by name and by performance levels. 60% of our 8th grade students last year with disabilities scored proficient and advanced. That is a very, very high number of kids compared to past years. 72% of students with disabilities demonstrated moderate to very high growth in 7th grade, arguably one of the hardest grades and hardest tests across the spectrum, 7th grade ELA. And we are above 50% in our students with disabilities there. 8th grade math, our freshmen now, 67% of our students with disabilities demonstrated that moderate to very high growth. So the most struggling students within the ranks of the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade continue to grow well above 50%. And I'd like to say that that translates eventually, and I would argue 10th grade, eventually translate to a higher proficiency level. It just takes every child a different amount of time to get there. No differently than running a marathon. It takes time, people grow at different paces, and in this district, we should be incredibly proud of how they finish the race at the end. But I'm really proud of that particular data around growth related to students with disabilities. Areas for consideration, I started to talk about math. Overall, our math percentage of proficient and advanced has consistently remained mid-60s to low 70s over the past 4 years. However, as I showed you on the last slide, there is lots of evidence about growth, and I'm positive that as that growth continues, if it happens 2, 3, 4, 5 years in a row, you're going to see that number go from the mid-60s to the low 70s to the high 70s to the low 80s, and eventually hit that 80, which is what we're really shooting for as a faculty and a staff. A couple things that I'd like to carefully point out that contribute to struggles in math sometimes in a small community. We are all chasing something. And so we're all looking at the high school, and we're all looking at course selections, and we're all looking at what you need to do to get to a certain math class by the time your child graduates from high school. As a result, we have a high number of waivers in 7th and 8th grade mathematics. We have a leveled math program. Parents have rights in Massachusetts. And if they are recommended for one particular math class, and they're so inclined, they can come see the principal and they can put their child in a different math class. That we have tracked that data. That does impact student results. Inarguably impact student results. It may not impact them negatively when they finally hit high school, but in that small year, it can have a result. The second thing that we can't forget is that math becomes more and more multi-layered and abstract at the middle school level, and that is a time of massive social, emotional, and cognitive growth. Arguably second only to when children are born to 5 years old. So all of the data says that those 3 or 4 years for young adolescents are just a boom when it comes to social, emotional, and cognitive change in your children. And then we throw at them multi-layered mathematics and abstract problem solving, and their bodies and brains just go, whoa! And they just have a hard time. And that has to be recognized if you study cognitive development for young adolescents. It's not an excuse, it's a reality. And again, that's why I continuously point to the student growth. The growth is important. We have talked a lot about it this year and last year, more so than the achievement levels. We're confident that the achievement levels will happen. We need to work towards 50% moderate and very high in all subject areas. When I slip to the next slides, you're going to see that we're almost there. We only have one group of students last year across all grades and all subject areas that did not meet that mark. That's really impressive. All but one group didn't hit that, and so you'll see that in the next slides coming up. And in all grades and subject areas, with the exception of 8th grade ALA, 67% or more of our students with disabilities scored needs improvement and warning. However, if you flip a slide back, where I was just patting us on the back, right, you'll see that I talked very proudly about the growth. So massive growth when it comes to students with disabilities. Currently, 67% of them still are in needs improvement and warning. That means they're deep in the bucket of warning, or were deep in the bucket of needs improvement, and they were many points away from where the line changes. And so, one slide back, huge growth. We do that 2 or 3 years in a row, they will cross over that line. I'm really confident that that's what's going to happen. And again, as they get to the high school, we see it happen. So it takes time to get there for some students. But that is an area of focus that we recognize the blend between being proud about student growth and the reality of where our achievement levels currently are with certain populations of students. And eventually we want to improve and increase the SGP of all students with disabilities, not just pockets in certain subjects or in certain grade levels. Before I go into the cohorts, the only other thing I want to mention is that we at the middle school talk a lot about two particular group of students that we have to focus on. And they don't jive well together. So for example, we have students that are at the warning and needs improvement level that we talk about a lot as a number. And then we have other students that are almost there in respect to moving from one performance level to another. They're 2 points away. They're 4 points away. Those kids are 2 to 4 questions away. But they get lost in the bar graphs I'm about to show you as a statistic. So there are lots of kids that are in a needs improvement bracket, but there might be 7 or 8 that are a question away. You don't know that looking at these slides. We know that because we've analyzed them by name and data. And so we concentrate in our intervention programs on 2 pockets of kids. The kids who are really substantially in the warning and needs improvement group, and then that next group of kids that are just almost there. And as much as it's tough to say, that group of kids is the one that moves your bar graph. But if your child is one of the ones at the other end, you want me focusing there too. So we got to focus on those 2 pockets of kids, and sometimes it doesn't move the bar graph at the same speed. So quickly, we'll go through. We have our cohort data here. This is last year's 6th graders, relatively flat. If you look at their cohort data over time, they're up 2% as a cohort moving from 5th to 6th grade. Not a big gain. It's nice to say it's a gain. As Mr. Bizzillo said, we like to see the pluses, and we're proud of that information. When you look at the same group when it comes to growth over time, again, relatively flat, 54 to 50% from 5th grade to 6th grade. We're really trying to stay at or above 50%, and with this particular group of kids, we're still there. Our current 7th graders, last year's 6th graders in mathematics, again, relatively flat from 4th to 5th to 6th, 66%, 75%, 68% of them in proficient and advanced. This particular group of children has kind of hovered in that same area over time for the past 3 years. And when it comes to growth, they had massive growth in 4th grade, and then they have remained pretty flat at 52 and 50% over time. Again, hitting our benchmark of trying to get at least 50% of them in that target area. This next group is our current 8th graders, which are our 7th graders last year. Really nice to pause on 7th grade. I said it a few minutes ago. This is a tough test. Lots of writing. It's the first, I think Mr. Bizzillo talked about the jump from one grade to the next academically down there. Might have been 3rd to 4th.
Yeah.
Right? In the middle school, if you've had a child come through, it's clearly 6th to 7th. It's clearly like 6th grade feels like it's sort of still elementary school in a new building, and then 7th grade, they all go, oh, I'm here now. It's a substantial change socially and emotionally, and it's really a change when it comes to curriculum. That's true in every place I've ever worked, every place I've ever lived in Massachusetts. So the fact that we have an uptick in this one group of kids compared to themselves, 5% increase as a cohort in the toughest grade that they're going to get tested in during their 3 years, that's pretty cool right there. And that we have 80% of our kids in that grade in the hardest year at the middle school in proficient and advanced. This is the only cohort, interestingly, that's the one I just patted on the back, so this is where data can play games with you, right? So we're psyched that they're 81% in the toughest year, and then they're the only group that I talk about tonight that is below having 50% of them above that SGP range that we're looking for. So they're at 43%. It's not way down, but they're up. And so, I use the Michael Jordan analogy all the time when I can. Michael Jordan was arguably, because I'm not a big LeBron fan, sorry, so the best basketball player ever to play the game. It's tough to continuously grow when you're there. Maintenance is not a bad word when you're a high-level person in some areas. And so if you've got 81% of your kids in the 7th grade in the hardest test at the middle school level, I'm not losing sleep that they didn't hit the 50% growth mark. If they continuously, as a cohort, don't hit it, then it's a different conversation. But I'm going to celebrate that 81%, if you let me. Current 8th graders, set last year's 7th grade in mathematics. Down a little bit as a cohort. They've been relatively flat across the board as a group of students. However, 55% of them hit that growth mark. So again, tough year. First year at LMS that they split math. first year that they go into pre-Al versus Math 7, first year that parents and students are allowed to opt for a different class. All impacts the final results of 7th grade. But again, 55% of them showing some solid growth, and I'm confident that if we keep plugging away at that, that's going to translate to higher achievement levels moving forward. And then our last group that came through, last year's 8th graders, in English language arts, really this particular group of children is a very bright group of kids, particularly strong in the performance area and growth area. So they went up 7% as a cohort when it came to their performance levels. And interestingly enough, again, a high-functioning group that went up in performance levels didn't necessarily go up in growth, right? Because as the superintendent explained to you, they're compared to their academic peers. So it's okay that you go up in one and flatline in another, or stay here in one and go up in the other one. You know, it's not okay over time when they both start to dip. That's the problematic feature of the data. Mathematics, this group compared to themselves is really solid. They went up 10% as a cohort. So if you just looked at the first slide and you went, geez, Mark, that's 65% of your 8th graders. That's not anything to make a big deal about. But compared to themselves by name, they went up 10% as a cohort. 55% of them in Proficient Advanced when they were 7th graders, 65%. So I would argue that that's a massive jump in one small calendar year. And if they duplicate that for another year and another year, there they are, nailing it in 10th grade again. And again, that same group, less growth. So they go up 10% in achievement level, and they didn't grow as much. And then this is the only chart that we have to make by hand still, because the state doesn't decide to give it to us, because the test only happens in 5th grade, and then again in 8th grade. And so it's really tough to talk about flat and growth and achievement level, because you got 3 years of not being tested in the middle there, or 2 years of not being tested in the middle. But relatively flat, 67% of them Proficient at Advanced, and then 3 years later, 64% of them. We always do very, very well at the middle school in science. Our science scores are consistent. We are consistently at the top of the state in that area, and very proud of the work we're currently doing in curriculum and science. And it'd be a great opportunity to plug the engineering club that is up to 40-something members after only 3 years. It's getting so big that we've had to bring in 3 parent real engineers to make sure we're working appropriately with those kids. So the science stuff is really cranking at the middle school right now. So this slide is, the first half of this is what we show you every year. You know that we do data teams. We sit down with our established protocols and we identify our areas of need, our areas of strength. We do that by subject area. We do that by curriculum. We do that by classroom. We do that by student. Last week you got the NWEA MAP assessment presentation. We are doing school-wide progress monitoring 3 times a year, which has been really beneficial. I was in an email exchange today with our rep from Edgenuity, and we will be doing training for the My Path program that the superintendent has talked about right after the Thanksgiving break. And that is a student-paced program that can benefit students of all levels, and it connects right to the MAP data, and it pushes out individual learning plans for kids that can be worked on in small groups in classrooms, in learning centers, and academic supports for high, medium, and low achieving students. And so I'm excited to see what the impact will be as we implement that over time. We will continue implementing the co-teaching in ELA and math, and I would argue that those giant results in students with disabilities, those growth percentages, have to be attributed in some way, not only to curriculum shifts, but the fact that we have special ed teachers and regular ed teachers working in partnership on mathematics to meet the needs of their individual kids. It has to be one of the reasons why. And we'll continue with our math lab model, which has continuously given us data that has been successful. And, with the help of you guys approving, the budgetary shifts and staffing, we now have a literacy lab with a certified reading specialist, and that was a huge gap. And so my hope is that I come back next year and I can attribute some of our growth and improvement in the ELA to the work that Ms. Stanton is doing in the literacy lab.
I had some questions on the 2020 class. Their advanced numbers dropped substantially for the ELA. And,
do you have a slide number? I'm sorry.
38.
Thank you.
You went from 14% advanced to 2%. And they also drop for math. Should there be a concern over that? I mean, that probably also is one of your reasons for your low SGP, right? Because you took kids from the advanced and put them in proficient, so they must not be growing as fast.
I just want to understand your question again.
So
So look at
if
slide
you-
38. I see 76% of our...
You have almost no advanced kids.
Right. So you heard me say that that's the toughest test in the state for middle school
Yeah,
students.
but if you look at the 2019 results, they don't jive with that quite the same, right? The percentages, I understand it's the toughest test, but
Yeah.
you lost 10% of your kids.
Are you comparing two different cohorts?
I'm comparing, yes. If
Right.
you look at the
So
20
I'm going to politely
So-
tell you that that's dangerous because I might have a particularly high-functioning group of kids and one that's different. So I'm looking at the
So-
group, I'm addressing the group on slide 37, or whatever, 38. Those kids grew 76% of them, and then you had 81% of them. So is you, right?
So the first question is, should you be concerned about the dearth of kids there in the advanced compared to, I mean,
Proficient?
the number's going down.
Only if it happens 2 or 3 years in a row.
And I know that it goes down every year. You can see it in the
Well,
other.
I'd be concerned if those kids by name went down 2 to 3 years in a row.
Okay.
Honestly, it's one day, one test, one time, the hardest one in the middle school. And so I'm looking at the big number that the first year, 76, in 6th grade, 76% of them were advanced proficient. True?
I was just looking at the advanced.
I understand that that's where you're looking, respectfully. My answer to you is, I'm not concerned about it because more students wound up in proficient and advanced. If the kids by name that were advanced slip in 2 to 3 years in a row, then yeah, we're going to have a problem. But I haven't seen any data over time where those advanced kids continuously do this. We've seen some data where the advanced kids coming into 7th grade slip because of the extent of that test. And then if you look at our 8th grade numbers, they gain it right back in 8th grade.
Let me help out, Mark. Remember, this is just one test. We have so much more data that, in this particular case, counterbalances what you see here. I think that's what was missing from the conversation. This is one assessment, but they undergo many different assessments, and we're not seeing that slide that's shown on this one particular test. So that gives us more confidence in what's happening throughout time with these students. Then when we get to the high school, we'll have the culminating test, for example, to look at too, plus all the other assessments we have. And that's going to give us some good information as well.
Okay.
So it's really, and it's hard at times because it's impossible for us to show you all the data. But we come here and we show you this small finite piece of data, and it's easy to draw those conclusions because you don't have that whole story in terms of the number of assessments that the students actually take. Does that help?
It helps. I'm still concerned about the number, and you also can't, at one hand, tell me I can't compare the class of 2019 to 2020, but then say we see the trend going up, right? So,
Well, you just have to remember that demographics within a student population of 100 can vary significantly from year to year. Actually, we see those trends throughout the state as well, which is fascinating to me because you're dealing with larger populations.
So if you look at slide 42, you'll also see that year, 24% of the kids were advanced in 6th grade. It dropped down to 8%, and then they regained above their 6th grade number in 8th grade. See that? So if you checked that out over time, you'd see almost every year that happens. And so I'm not trying to be disrespectful in answering your question. I'm not concerned because I know that every year that's the case. So if I dropped that column out and I said, well, the kids went from 24% of them in advanced to 27, you'd go, wow, that's awesome. It's a blip because of the difficulty in that test, and they rebound.
okay.
Actually above the number that they started at in 6th grade. So if you look at all those slides and ask yourself the same question you just asked me, on slide 42, you see your answer.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think I'm going to follow up very similar lines here, because I was looking at charts 40 and then 40. Let's go to chart 40 for a second. What bothered me on this chart is this is 40, not 42.
Say it again, I'm sorry.
Yeah, 40.
Yeah.
So this is the same cohort here, and what bothered me when I just saw the graph, and I still think I might need a little bit more explanation, is as I look at the red, the dark red, and then the light red, and it continually grows from this cohort from grade 3 to grade 7. And then if I flip to chart 46, is that the same one for the class of 19? 44. I can see the rebound that you're talking about at grade 8, but I see the same pattern, which is the increasing over that 4-year span of more needs improvement and warning.
In math.
Yes.
In particular in math.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
You know, so it
yeah,
starts off
absolutely.
relatively, and then it goes big, and then it jumps
Yeah.
a little bit. And I'm just looking for
Yeah.
maybe a little bit more on
Yeah.
what's going on there.
I think, well, one, you're right. I think that's actually been a kind of a trend, and I haven't compared it to a state trend. That would be interesting for me to do, actually. And I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah,
because
no, that would just...
Yeah, I'd like to do that with the math team, because we talked about this as a math team in the past, that, you know, again, you can see real numbers on this slide, right? So it's 6 kids, 7 kids, and then 16. So the 6 to 7 isn't that tough in the warning area, but the 7 to 16, again, they're moving from a 6th grade test with no leveled math and no algebraic expectations to a cognitively more difficult test, and without disclosing too much information, theoretically, there could be more students with advanced needs in certain pockets of kids too, and certain populations of kids will struggle quickly with abstract math and multiple step problem solving. And so,
Well, there are a number of variables too,
Yeah,
Principal Branco, in terms of how many students followed the suggested track,
Correct.
as opposed to ones that didn't, and
Correct.
those create different results as well. The important thing is, you know, we look at these patterns, but as you look at our high school results, by the time they write those Mcas tests, we're very high.
Yeah.
So we've taken care of whatever, I don't know what we're going to call an anomaly, or the attention has been given. And I think that's the important rest of the story that you're going to hear. But those are things that we're monitoring. And the map testing is going to be very powerful in taking a look at this pattern and comparing it to what we see with performance with those students 3 times a year using those map tests.
I'm not tagging it as a problem right now. It's
It's a reality.
very noticeable
Yeah.
on that
It
graph.
is.
And I was just looking for, you know, maybe some, when you finish your
Yeah.
analysis,
And the
a
other,
little bit of feedback.
and the
on
other
that.
slide you referred to, I think, was 44, right? And mathematically, it's exactly the same with different numbers.
Yeah.
So, right, if you notice that, it's 4 students or 4%, 6
So,
students.
Doing what
It's-
you
right?
said you didn't want to do is compare 2 different
I
cohorts.
know.
but-
I don't mind.
but
Listen,
just
I'm
showing
not-
you a way that-
I don't want you to think I don't think that's relevant.
Yeah, that's all.
Right?
Just tricked
Yeah.
your question
Yeah.
to get my
Mark,
point
if
across.
I can just jump into,
Yeah.
this is, if we just think about what we had talked about, this is a very, very, very unusual slide.
Right.
If you look at, that slide is the only one in all the years I've been here that doesn't have a 4th grade dip in it.
Right.
And the 3rd grade is lower than you would typically see. So, as Mark indicated, that's a very unique cohort of kids that you see there
Right.
compared to a typical Littleton pattern when you look at that. So, that is a very unique, I think it's interesting to see as it's gone on, that it has that trend, because I remember when we looked at that with the 5th grade team, when we got those results and went, hey, listen, what's going on? Because we normally get this big bump from 4th grade to 5th grade, and that was sort of a red alert time for us when we looked at that. And so this is definitely a
Same group of kids.
unique pattern.
Yeah.
It's also the largest class we have in the district.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the class.
We had big class sizes.
I don't know if that is...
Yeah, so you can't quantify that,
Sure
Mike, but
that causes an issue, but it could be a confounding
Yeah.
factor.
it's never been proved to help, so. Let's just put it that way.
One more, and I don't think I can really get this tonight, because I also noticed Rita left. I can't remember which chart you had it, but you had the one that had 67% needs improvement warning, except ELA. So if I reinterpret that as 67% of our needs improvement warning, high needs due to math.
No, that was in all grades.
It's 8th grade ALA, I think, was the only exception.
Yeah.
One forward, I think.
I lost
Yeah.
it.
So in-
could you maybe re-explain bullet 4 on there for me?
Yeah, so In all grades and all subjects, except 8th grade ELA, because if you
Oh,
go,
okay.
if you go back and look at the 8th grade ELA data, you'll see that that particular group of students with disabilities is higher. With the exception of that one, in all grades and all subjects, 67% or more of our students with disabilities are still sitting in the needs improvement and warning category. However, if you go back to this one and celebrate the bottom 3 lowest, that's a massive amount of growth, and it's consistent growth. So what I'm telling you is that group of students was a lower point of the bucket. And as a result, they need maybe another year or two of that consistent growth to get us so that way less than 67% of our students with disabilities are down there. Our students with disabilities in the middle school are clearly growing and improving in their skill sets and increasing their knowledge base, but they're at a disadvantage, right?
Yep.
And so, that's the two pieces of data together are really crucial.
So the underlying question is have you done an analysis of the different types of disabilities
Yes.
that each of the students have
Yes.
and correlated those
Yes.
to the teaching strategies and
And the
their
programming.
scores?
Yep.
And
They're placed in
and
specific...
obviously, I'm not going to get a
Well,
specific...
no, but I will tell you, they're placed strategically, they're put in specific programming, and they're assessed and taught in a manner that is supposed to match the divisions.
District-wide, and again, it's hard for you guys to get the whole story, so much data. This is an area, as a district, when I worked with Rita and had her tease out student profiles, with all the students that had IEPs and matched services with progress. One of the things that I had asked for is that we enhance our partnership between special education and regular education, so that those opportunities to dialogue and match various curricula were in place. And when I look at that 67% growth rate, I'm telling you, for somebody that has done this for 30-something years, that is unbelievably high for that cohort. So we managed in 1 year to jump the growth scores, and it's like, it's similar to finding the right recipe. You need to find the right recipe first. Growth scores tell you that you're finding the right recipe when you see those jumps. And I mean, though cohorts are smaller, there's more variance, but what's powerful about this is, and I don't like using the word mandate, but the request to get these two groups of professionals together with the expectation that you need to be on the same page in terms of your curricula. We don't want parallel curricula. We want convergent curricula. And within a year, we've seen a tremendous difference. And so we're on the right path, so to speak.
Thank you. Yeah, I like not to beat a dead horse, but I think there's something that can be added to the conversation that was happening at the other end of the table on the 7th grade ELA. And we didn't look at longitudinally.
7th ELA or 7th math?
ELA, the 7th grade, sorry, not on this slide, the conversation we were having
Yeah,
earlier.
I just want to see what we're talking about.
Yeah, on the long comp. And I didn't see in the slides, and that's because there are a million different ways to display information. You got to choose what you want to talk about. But I looked online, and the 7th grade ELA advanced numbers, and you're not going to see them in your slide, but the 7th grade ELA advanced numbers have slipped consistently, not precipitously, but they have gone down from 2012 to 2013 to 2014 to 2015.
Comparing one group of kids to another group of kids.
Yes, and as you said, year to year could be one cohort, but we've seen now from 2012 to 2015 that each consecutive cohort is seeing fewer kids scoring advanced. Now, about the same numbers are scoring advanced proficient. So within those students who are quote-unquote passing, it's still generally the same number of students who are passing essentially, but the nature of that is, and I know you don't have that in front of you. And I'm not
Well, I have enough in my head. Did you look to see that they rebound?
I just
I just flashed ahead for you.
Sure.
And so if you look, you'll see that more often than not, they then rebound in 8th grade.
Right, because it
So
is
if that wasn't true, I'd be concerned, right? If I'm playing basketball and I get a little worse every year, I'd be concerned. If I have a bad season and I recover and then I'm better than I was 2 years prior, I don't know that anybody'd be that concerned. And so I'm not saying I'm not concerned in real time, Alex, because I am about kids by name, but if you look at this particular slide, you'll see that then you've got 27% coming back in 8th grade, where it went, did you see this went from 24 to 8 to 27, the one I have up here? Similar, exact same thing that you're talking to me about with the grade before them.
You also have
It's
to-
pretty consistent.
You also have to look at the point differential between advanced and proficient. I mean, if you have a group of kids that are slipping back into proficient with a 2-point variance, a lot different. A lot different if you have a 10-point variance. So, again, that's what we expect of our principals and our teachers to tease out those details and see what those variances are. And obviously, if the variance is greater, then red flags start surfacing. So.
And I know, I'm not sure if you said this earlier or if Scott said this earlier, but oftentimes the difference between needs improvement and warning is one question or one or two questions.
And this doesn't show you that at all.
And I'm sure that's true at the top as well.
Yeah, we do that, yeah.
I just wanted to point out that the trend in the 7th grade ELA, which you're right, is a harder test, so it's normal. I would be surprised to see a school district where students did better in the 7th grade than they did in 6th grade, and then they went sort of down back to 6th grade levels when they took the 8th grade test. Because the 7th grade is a harder test because there's a long time, and we don't do that in 6th grade or in 8th grade. But how, and I'm not expecting an answer, but I would.
You want us to look at it? Yeah.
Just to put it on your radar, because
absolutely.
there's so much data and you're not going to be
That's
able
fair.
to look at
No,
everything.
that's totally fair.
And longitudinally, that would be interesting to look at.
Yep.
You mentioned earlier about the waivers for the 8th grade math. I didn't.
7th and 8th.
7th and 8th grade. So is that a waiver on taking the test or a waiver on taking the standard class because they're advanced or they're moving on to a different subject?
Students are recommended based on a set criteria for either Math 7 or pre-algebra, and then in 8th grade, pre-algebra or algebra. And parents and students have the right to waive that recommendation.
And you're saying that they waive into one that they're recommended not going into, right?
Yeah, nobody ever waives the other direction, right?
Very seldom. Yeah, very, well, I would have if I could have.
Me too.
That's why you have parents.
So what happens,
just like-
let me give you a real example.
but,
So a 7th grader waived into 8th grade algebra is taking a high school algebra class. Same pacing guide, same textbook, same mid-year, same final as the kid sitting in a freshman class. That class is going to move.
So we're not going to test them on all that.
Well, they're doing material that's well beyond what the test is going to ask of them, and if they didn't have it, based on our criteria, when they didn't get placed there, it's tough to hold that teacher in the school accountable for getting that to get gap filled now. And I'm not making a judgment station, I'm just making a factual statement.
Two different missions.
Yes, it is. And I'm not judging it. Look, I have an 8th grade daughter, and I won't disclose on television what my decision had been where I live. But I made a decision on my child placement. I'm not judging placement, I'm just stating fact.
That's just good to know. I wasn't sure exactly what you meant by that. And then the students who took all tests versus the students with the October 1st enrollment date. I just saw on the earlier up there is, and on one slide there is.
All of these slides come from the DESC, and when we pull them, we deliberately pull them so that they're the same kids. So you see how it says 102, 102, 102, 102. Obviously, some years kids move in and out, but the data is most statistically meaningful when it's the exact same number and the same kids. So those are the slides we pull.
There was an earlier slide that talked about the October 1st enrollment date, and the reason I bring that up is because oftentimes, as you know, students will move out either to a charter school, school choice, their parents leave the district, or they'll move in, and of course there's special ed placement as well. When we look at that October 1st enrollment date, would you expect that the students who are in this, well, I guess what I'm asking is, how much of that do you think would impact the results we're seeing in a meaningful way, or is it just?
No, I think Scott said it, like it's kind of a wash. Some kids, some kids move in, some kids move out, and you don't know whether they're a high achieving. You don't know if it's a high.
One or two kids every now and then. I mean, it's not like kids are moving in out of the district every day.
Yeah, it's 1 to 2%.
You need to know, and
Maybe none.
I think you understand this, I'm going to say it just in case, though, is that when those kids move in, we still do individual profiles.
Right.
With them. We still have that information.
Correct.
It's just not included in the cohort because it would create more of a variance to be able to draw a pattern.
Positive or negative, but a variance nonetheless.
Exactly.
Right.
That's helpful. And then my last comment is that not to go back to the field discussion, but I think what you're seeing here is you're planting seeds.
Yeah.
And Scots have already blossomed. Or come to fruition, and they're playable. Playable fields, and I think you're talking about the right things, and you're talking about the right approaches, and you're still trying to, you're taking off. And I don't think, and I think that was sort of one of your points earlier on, perhaps with a less controversial metaphor.
I have a meeting with about 15 to 20 middle school principals tomorrow, and I am sure this is going to be a very interesting conversation at this particular time of year around what trends we're seeing, in all of our schools, what it's like to try to educate kids at a prime time of their life when things are popping for them. And, we learn from each other in those kind of meetings, too.
And I really like how you focus on how the students in the middle school, more so than any of the other schools, are going through a lot of change. Maybe Shaker Lane when they're first getting accustomed to
birth to
public
five,
schools.
basically.
But that is key, and so if they struggle, they're going to struggle. And I don't think our students are overall struggling, but we see some that are, and I think you're doing a good job at trying to address them. So thank you for your work.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Brinkham.
Thanks.
Mr. Harrington.
Steve, you can take one.
Do you want me to change the slides?
No, I'll keep
That'd be great, thank you so much. Okay, so, good evening. It's been a long evening for you. I appreciate your patience as we go through the slides. Happy to report tonight to the school committee positive and strong results for Lilton High School. Once again, if we go to the first slide, we'll see that we still have a significant number of students scoring in the advanced category. And once again, when I report positive results, I credit the district, perspective, and my colleagues at the other schools, as well as the staff, and most importantly, the students for their dedicated effort on this spring test each year, or the series of spring tests that we have. Grade 10, ELA, we had 99% of our students proficient or advanced. Grade 10 mathematics, we had 96% of our students proficient and or advanced. And in science, technology, and engineering, in this cohort, this 11th grade cohort, they took the test primarily as 9th graders, but the results are reported as 9th and 10th grade science, technology, and engineering, because students may have taken another test if they moved in, like we were just talking about. They may have taken the chemistry test. 55% of our students were advanced, 36% proficient, so 91% of the class of 2017 proficient and or advanced. Grade 9 biology, this is just looking ahead into the future, and I wanted to compliment Cheryl Harrington as well as Sarah Berlinger for their great work in the 9th grade. And the results were really stupendous. 100% of our students proficient or advanced, 70% advanced, 30% proficient in biology. The caveat to this is that a number of students did not participate in the biology test like they typically would because they have significant special needs. We had a unique cohort come through with the class of 2018. So we've implemented a 2-year preparation process for these students with a unique sequence of courses. And these students will be taking the science Mcas after completing a biology course this year. So I just wanted to acknowledge that the results are outstanding, but a number of students who likely would have scored in the needs improvement category, perhaps the failing category, but certainly in the needs improvement category are in a 2-year preparation process. The state allows us to do that. The requirement is that you take a science test by the completion of 10th grade, so we felt we'd take advantage of that leeway with the state and and lots of school districts do this. We've just always taken primarily our science Mcas test in the 9th grade. Other schools will have all their 10th graders take it. But we do it in the 9th grade. So just wanted to acknowledge that. The SGP, we'll stay on this slide for a second, student growth percentile for ELA, moderate at 52.5 and high for math at 63. And as you know, it's not reported for science. So students performed exceptionally well. High achievement, high growth in math, high achievement, moderate growth in ELA. If we could just move on to the next slide there, Steve. One more. Thank you. High highlighting class 2017, I've already mentioned 78% advanced. 81% of our special education students scored proficient or higher. Very proud of that stat because I understand that a number of students have math disabilities and struggle with the subject in particular, but their dedicated effort showed through. ELA SGP, as I already mentioned, was 52.5. The advanced group for ELA, 67% of the students were advanced in the class of 2017. Fantastic work by the juniors when they took the test as sophomores. And 96% of special education students in ELA scored proficient or advanced, and that is a huge credit and testimony to the hard work and collaboration of the special education department with the English language arts teachers, as well as I want to credit the guidance counselors. And of course, as always, the students for their hard work on that test. If we'll go to the cohort slides, we'll go to the first one there. Class of 2017, ELA, 69 to 70% of Littleton Public School students were advanced in ELA by grade 10. If we go to the next slide, the growth slide for ELA, you'll see that the distribution of growth levels is very even in ELA, very even. In terms of how they hit the different categories, very high, moderate, low, and even to some degree very low. We want to see that decline as we go down to the low area or very low, and we see that happen. Again, good results in growth for the English language arts class of 2017. Go to the class of 2017 mathematics achievement levels. Thank you, Steve. 79 to 80% of Littleton Public School students who went through were advanced in mathematics by 10th grade. Great job. And we'll go to the next slide. The growth data for class of 2017, mathematics. Most students showed high or very high growth in math. Very proud of their work once again. And we'll go to the next slide. This slide was already acknowledged as a school district created slide. If we compare the data in science, technology, engineering from the different years of 2010, 2013, 2015, these are achievement levels, not growth data. But we see when they in the high school, spring of 2015, look at that great chart in terms of advance and the improvement from 8th grade. 91% advanced or proficient, a big change, an increase in the categories, and we see the decrease where we want to see it in terms of failures and needs improvement in that category. So great results in science. So next steps, we go to Lilton High School next step slides. It's very consistent with our past practice. We try to keep things consistent if they're working well, and we make adjustments and tweaks where we need to. Further data analysis and examination of student growth percent. We want to engage in further data analysis and examination of student growth percentiles. Of course, especially with students who scored low or very low in growth. And we want to look particularly closely at the incoming ninth graders. Really having some early warning signs, looking at their term grades, their transcripts, but also looking at how they performed on the Mcas and make adjustments in the ninth grade prior to them taking the 10th grade test. So we have 2 years to work on that with the math test or in the English test. In the science test, it's a little bit different because most of our students take it as ninth graders in June. But we want to make sure we're intervening where necessary. And one of the ways we're doing that now at the high school is we've implemented a tutoring center this year to help with that early intervention, and it's part of it runs throughout the school day, almost every mod, and we hope by next year to be running that every mod of the day. There will be a refinement of educational proficiency plans. This is a bullet point that's in there every year for student scoring needs improvement, and this is going to be in a shared Google Drive. And that refinement is just necessary per the state. It adjusts based on the different students in each cohort. The advanced use of Edwin Analytics, there's a lot. I was talking to my principal colleagues this evening, and we were talking about all the unique reports that we're not necessarily using at this point in time, because some of them just came online in the last year. But it's amazing what you can do. The challenge for us is having the time to do it, but we do have data teams in each building working on this, and we'll continue to advance our knowledge of the best practices with assessment and assessment analysis. Structural adjustments this is embedded into how we do things. It's a culture of our school. It's how we do our job each and every day. How are we making adjustments based on the kids in front of us? And it's something our staff here repeatedly from me about understanding the student in front of us. We're not just teaching content, we're teaching students. We need to get to know them. We help them through building positive relationships and getting to know them as learners, and working in close partnership with parents to make interventions or adjustments when we need to. We have a very proactive approach. It's part of our culture. We have frequent communication with parents of academically struggling students and students who score in the warning category. And we've been doing that for a long time, and it's shown through the results. If you look through our trend data for years, this approach works. It's best practice, and we actively practice it each day. And I've already mentioned the continued early intervention in 9th and 10th grade. I, again, want to applaud the faculty at the high school and commend the students for their outstanding performance this year on the Mcas.
Alex, any questions or comments?
Yeah. Again, great results at the high school, which we've seen the last, well, as long as I've been on the committee at least. And I think I joked last year, or someone made a joke last year about the 99% ELA number. You can't get any higher.
Hold it steady.
But you held that steady, so it's...
Yeah, across the board.
When you can't improve, there's no opportunity to improve. That's the best
Where we
thing to
see where we can improve, though, and we do have an ethic of continuous improvement at the high school and throughout the district, is with the student growth percentiles, where we see the students who are, how can we help those kids score a little bit better? I was looking at some notes from an English teacher, Mr. Pascucci. He's our ELA coordinator, and he had said to me one of the things he wants to work on for next year is see less students in the proficient category and more students in the advanced category. And that's the challenge of high-performing districts now, and sort of the thing that gets noted when you start to score really well is how many students did you get in the advanced category, not just proficient. We're doing a really good job of keeping students out of the needs improvement category. We're always going to have a few there. We have some students with really significant intellectual disabilities and things like that, where they're just going to, and they're mandated to take the test, and they're just going to always be, they're going to be challenged. And we do a remarkably good job, and we could see that in the results I reported tonight in ELA, for example. But those students, we celebrate when they get the needs improvement and they've passed that test. We get almost more excited about that than the kid who's, I'm sorry to say, who gets the 280, the perfect score, because we know what it took for that student and the teamwork involved to get that student to pass that test. And unique at our grade level in high school is that it's a graduation requirement. So this student now has a pathway to the diploma. It's the one thing maybe that was going to get in the way, because we can make adjustments in modify our curriculum, make adjustments, but we need that. And so there's the joy that you see in the building when we see a student who gets that 220 is extraordinary. And while I'm grateful we don't have a lot of students scoring in the needs improvement category, when we do, we know that those students are overcoming significant obstacles and challenges in their academic life and perhaps personal life.
The one thing I'd love to see more information about is the SGPs for the students with disabilities, or the high needs students.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I know you
It's
can't
really
conjure that, but I was wondering if you could
That's
talk
about
a little bit about that.
44 for ELA and 60 for math, so it's really good. It's high and moderate for ELA, high for mathematics, and it's great. We see that growth with the students with disabilities as we do with the whole cohort.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm good.
All right, thanks. Have a good night.
Hey, appreciate the Mcas presentation. And every year that we see it, what I really like about Littleton is I don't know if luxury is the right word, but we take advantage of the opportunity. I think we have a better opportunity to use it as a student-level assessment. And I think we've done a good job of that over the years, of taking the advantage of that opportunity that maybe other districts don't have. And I think we take do a good job of taking advantage of that opportunity. So it's good to, we had to talk about the MAP assessment last week, and now we see this one. And we talked about the balance of how much assessment we want to do, but if we are going to do the assessment, we may as well take advantage of it. When it informs curriculum and it informs instruction and informs achievement at a student-by-student level, I think we're making the best out of a situation that maybe we don't always want to be in, but if we're going to be in it, let's do the best we can with it. It'll be interesting to see, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, the evolution of our ability to do that as the test evolves. But thank you very much for all of you.
Thank you.
For that.
A little, just a few comments to, excuse me, add some context or further context to the situation. When we do these data presentations, we have a tendency to dig down, and that's fine, but you have to remember that Mcas is an important measure, and I said that at the beginning of the presentation, but it's a cog in a wheel, a big wheel. It does not measure curriculum. It measures standards. So it does not measure everything that we do with our students in our classrooms. And as leaders, what we do is we look at the entire wheel in terms of directing education for our students and making sure that we spend most of our time with authentic learning, not skill and drill learning. And I say that because it takes a long time to create that climate in an era of accountability. And if we're not careful in these presentations, we lose sight of the importance of developing that whole child. And I know you get it as a school committee, but if I didn't know that and I was just sitting in the audience and watching tonight's presentation, I would say that we're very heavy into standardized assessment. And I know that's not true. That's why we're having this conversation. We need to continue to empower our teachers, provide them with professional development so that they use best and next practices. And if we focused on one cog too much, that wouldn't happen. For example, we sent one of our schools out to a number of other schools that were doing better on Mcas with the intent, let's get them in some classrooms, let's figure out what they're doing. What we found out, no surprise to me, is that some of these schools hire teachers in the early spring to focus on Mcas testing. I'm sorry, that's not my philosophical approach to learning, and I'm not faulting them for it. Everybody has their own philosophical basis. My philosophy and our leadership team's philosophy is to build lifelong learners with solid foundations and have our students well-rounded, resilient, and with a solid base and an attitude of wanting to learn throughout their entire lives. Those are our primary goals in Littleton School District. And I think we're doing a pretty good job of that. And I'm not underplaying the importance of standardized testing, but it's just one piece of many things that we do. And I thought it was important that I brought that forward this evening as we take a look at, we're always looking at our strategic plan, we're always looking at our vision, and it's important that we keep those conversations in the right context. So thank you to the school committee for your support, and thank you to the administrative team. I have to say, when I look out at all my principals, there's not one that isn't a very, very strong instructional leader with a solid pedagogical base. And I'm very proud of that, especially with all the other roles that they play on a daily basis. So thank you.
I'd also like to say I thought the questions that you guys gave were great, and
Yes.
you held them accountable to the numbers. I thought the responses you guys had were appropriate, and maybe some things you will walk away from that you can take another look at, but I thought we did a good job tonight as a group of holding them accountable and keeping their feet to the fire, so to speak. So that's a good job. We'll pat on the back for ourselves. We don't do that often enough.
Deserve it.
All right, any old business?
We just have Alex's goals on there, and I'm not sure whether you want to do that tonight or put it.
No, let's.
I didn't get any feedback from
Okay.
last time.
All right, let's take one more look at that, and if you don't get anything back, then come back with it ready to knock them out. All right. Superintendent report?
Sure. And this won't take me long. Every year I bring you focus elements for the teachers, administrators, and superintendent. And we always, we've done this for a number of years since the new NFL came out. We focused on 10 to 12 elements, and that allows us to align them to our strategic plan, and it allows us to really move our staff forward in areas that respond to the learning needs of our students. To do all the elements, again, I've been evaluating teachers for many years, results in, for lack of a better word, just a surface check. Whereas we can go in great detail now and tailor professional development and professional learning community discussions that focus on something that's manageable. Personally, I've seen, and I know my administrators can attest to this, great gains in both knowledge, pedagogy, and instructional delivery and assessment design by doing it this way. What we did with educators this year, which is a little different, is we have 12 key elements, but we're saying to them, we want to encourage innovation and entrepreneurship. So we have to be cautious here that we're not setting the tone for inflexibility. So we've said to them, if you want to do another element, replace an element, that's fine. You just have to work it out with your evaluator and justify it. And that way we get that opportunity for them to jump into areas where they want to jump in. So but we're excited about that. And I also do the same thing with the administrative team. I've done it actually before this year. And it just allows us to personalize the process a little more. So those are the elements again. You can see from the recognition we received and what our students are doing once they leave our high school that it's successful, and we want to continue on that path. And we do review these with the LEA and the leadership team every year to ensure that there aren't others that we want to spend greater attention on. It doesn't mean those others aren't part of the conversation. It's just not our focus in terms of primary focus. Are there any questions on that before I move on?
I'm good.
So, just looking at yours.
Because that's the only one we can really move anything at.
You can look at it all. And maybe thinking about it maybe for next year rather than this year. So E2, district, school and district goals. We've worked on that we've had a focus on that for the last couple of years with the district plan. At which point do you think we want to maybe use item 3 there, improvement of performance, effectiveness, and learning, to tie that into sort of part of the earlier conversations that we were having in terms of how we're shaping the instructional strategies and progressing the district. I just don't know if we want another year focusing on the district, school and district goals piece, where we're at with the vision, the Vision 2020. Are we solid with that at this point, or should we keep that as a focus point? And I just wanted to bring that up as a possible discussion point.
I do go into number 3 when I look at the ratings of the evaluation indicator. And one of my biggest concerns is, and I'm glad you brought that up, I'm not at this point comfortable that the strategic plan is part of our culture within our organization, and that's the biggest demise of strategic planning. If you take your focus off it, then it becomes a piece of paper that collects dust. Mm-hmm. So it has to become part of that culture of the organization. We're getting closer, but to be quite frank, I don't think we can ever take our eye off it. But can we spend less attention on it? Yes, and I'm hoping we're going to be coming there, but we're not there yet.
I just wanted to just discuss that for, that was the only one that I had a question on.
But that's a great question.
I'm very comfortable with keeping it focused as it is.
Why don't we, next item is discussion regarding the state decision on standardized testing. Let's hold off on that one. That's pretty brand new. Just hit the papers a couple days ago. We can all think about it a little bit, and I think it's going to be a good discussion. So I'd rather not cheat ourselves out of the opportunity to have a good discussion on it, given that we're running a little late. So we'll hold off on that one.
Next meeting.
It's not going to get any less fresh, I don't think. It might even be more fresh. But
yeah.
It might be even more interesting to discuss it after the dust settles a little bit, because the dust is definitely still in the air on that one. All right, interested citizens. Seeing none. All right, we're going to go to subcommittee reports, PMBC.
We had a meeting last night. Got a quick readout from the budget, report.
Yeah.
I think you'll probably touch on the same types of things there. School roof is done at this point. And I think, and I think we already touched the Shaker Lane piece there. So I think, the current batch, they're still working. The one item of interest is the track there. The company has been slow coming out to do the warranty work.
Okay.
They were supposed to be here this week or coming,
And they'll get here next week, they may as well not come for a little.
well, that was
longer,
part of the
right?
discussion that we're having
Right.
there. So they've exchanged emails, and I don't know if they're at the verge of formal letters to formalize when they're going to get out here. They've committed to come out to repair the track there. I think once they do that, we'll want to keep a close eye on whether there's any other damages. We have a 5-year warranty on that, of which, that type of problem is, I guess I'm getting to a point is, I don't think we ought to let them off the hook, even if there's a nick in it that looks like a crack.
Right.
I want to make a point to get them out here to fix it, because we're not happy on the delay that they've been giving us for the repairs, quite frankly. On it.
Budget Subcommittee, so we had a little presentation here last week, and then I took that same presentation over back here on Saturday and gave it to the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen. It was well received. There was really not a whole lot of discussion on it. A couple questions, just regarding the typical things about. I had a couple questions about enrollment numbers and what our projected enrollment is. When we talked about, adding staff at Russell Street and/or one of the other buildings, they just had a question about enrollment trends and how we're doing. So we'll get them some more information on that. But it's a preliminary opportunity to present the increase, and they took it as such. I did talk to them about the timeline we're on to provide more detailed information in the format that they've asked for, and they were happy to hear that that's going to happen on time and be encompassing to what they're looking for. That was really it. So we'll just continue the budget process, we'll continue to move forward across the town. We'll go from there.
Did they give any indication as to their ability to fund the number?
No, and they don't. At that meeting, they don't. They don't
That's
really
really-
talk about that. I was there, they were finishing up one department, and they were running a little bit late, so I got to see another whole department, the library, give their discussion, or give their presentation, and then there was discussion about it. And they're not even talking to them about it. It's just level budget, mission budget, thank you very much, take it under consideration.
And the same question came up with PMBC, and all it really said is there was $3.X million of request and $2.X million of money, no decisions.
Right.
They were just totaling up the bottom lines during that.
Right, but they didn't even talk about what they're thinking about the overall increase in the appropriation from their point of view yet. So that
They
really
mentioned it
was
at the selectmen's meeting on Monday, said it was about $500,000 off. And they were happy with the way Saturday went and with the fact that we came in with the number early for them. So.
Speaking of patting ourselves on the back earlier, I think, and I'm serious here, I think we've done a really good job this year at not only getting that number early, which is tough because we know what's going to change between now and May. It's already changed. But I think we did a really good job of that. I think we've also done a really good job at making sure that our process is open and understandable for everyone. And if the FinCom wanted to come down and see our budget cost center breakdowns, they could. I don't think they will, but they could. I think that's important. I think we've done a really good job of that.
So it was a good meeting, it was fine, and in and out, in about the amount of time I expected, and no more scars than I already have on me anyway, so. All right. Policy Subcommittee.
Yes, so if you go to page 109 of your packet.
It hurts. I don't think I send it all down.
Well, no, because
Exactly right.
it did get tucked in the upfront part of the piece here. So I've got a batch of policies for first reading tonight here. So actually, most of them are current. I went through the review. There's no changes in them. The one that has a change in it is the tobacco products on school property. Oh, by the way. So,
I heard the bag crinkling,
I was
all of a sudden
worried.
I didn't hear anything beyond it, you just started talking.
yeah, I know. I'm just seeing if you're paying attention.
I didn't want to be rude.
Here, buddy, cigarettes.
there. So in the policy ADC, that's our tobacco policy, wanted to take the initiative to include e-cigarettes, vape, whatever the current terminology is, to indicate that those are not allowed on school property there. And then we circulated it through the principals and got a recommendation back. We incorporated one of them about the warnings on smoking and secondhand smoke there. I pulled some language from the Surgeon General's office that clearly indicates that smoking is bad for you, as well as all forms of secondhand smoke. So just to sort of put as a little bit of motivational piece in addition to the legal requirements there. And then I've got a couple of them tagged that they're not in the packet for tonight here. I've circulated a draft AD, educational philosophy one, and the intent would be is to pull IA, IHBB into those. That's the gifted and talented education and the instructional goals and learning objectives. So just consolidate down to one educational philosophy thing. So when I circulate the new AD, we'll come back and recommend rescinding those policies there. And then on my Christmas work list is technology, homework, graduation requirements, and then I've got like 5 or 6 other ones that have legal updates that I want to catch up in the next batch there. So primarily tonight, they're all just first readings that they've been reviewed, and then that one other one that's been modified.
I sent you extremely recently, right before my battery died, actually, a bunch of grammar changes to policies, mainly grammar. The one I had questions on was the smoking policy.
Yeah.
Because it only covers things on the school property. What about field trips or off-property school events?
Those are covered by the handbook,
Right.
the student handbook.
Okay.
There.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm good.
And then, and then I think 2 years ago when we did the initial review, we consolidated there was a separate student smoking policy and a separate staff smoking policy, and we just consolidated to a single policy.
What a different world we live in.
Right.
From not that long ago.
Yeah.
All right, anybody else? Let's go. All right, can I get a motion?
I make a motion to approve for a first
You gotta
reading.
blow it up because
Here it is.
Make a motion for first, I got it, thank you. I do have glasses on. Motion for first reading of the following reviewed policies: GBA, GBEBC, GCG, IC-ICA, ID, IGA, IGB, IGD, IHA, IHAE, IHAM, IHAMA, pause for a breath, IHAMB, IHB, IHBD, IHDEA, IHBG, IHCA, IJ, IJA, IJJ, IJK, IJL, IJOA, IK, IKF, IL, IMA, IMB, IMD, IMDA, and IMG.
Seconded.
Thank you.
The only thing I want to say, it's not IC dash, it's slash.
Listen,
Come
you did say
we're gonna
dash.
do this. Can we get
I
it right,
almost said-
please?
All
Thank
right,
you.
Yeah, in the proposed motion, it was a slash.
All right, any further discussion on the motion for first reading? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay, and there's one more, very much shorter motion.
I'll take it.
I motion to, for the first reading, the following modified policies. Policy, ADC.
Motion made,
Second.
seconded. Any discussion on that?
I have some discussion on that, but I'll save it for afterwards.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None? Okay. I will ask for a very brief executive session for the purposes of contract negotiation strategy. So can I get a motion on that?
I make a motion that we adjourn from open session to executive session to discuss of contract negotiation with no intent to re-enter into open session.
Okay. Okay, and we're going to say that is a roll call vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. All right, thank you very much, everybody. Oh, sorry, real quickly. Thanksgiving this weekend, Littleton Rotary Breakfast at the middle school, 6:30 to 10 a.m., followed by a home football game. It's senior day. We haven't had one of those in a while because we usually keep playing. Not this year, but it's still been a great year and a great group of seniors. So come have breakfast, come watch the football game, see the seniors. Thank you. All right, we'll see you guys in December.